In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organizations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organizations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts, along with early access to analytics talent who speak the language of business, technology, and mathematics to drive value and navigate change. Through the power of analytics, we are empowering organizations to put their future into their hands.
At SAS, we love bold questions, outrageous and impossible questions. The answers are waiting to be discovered because space isn't the new frontier. Data is. And with the right questions and the right analytics, we make data do amazing things. Like make the world safer, faster, healthier, and kinder. All we have to do is ask the data, analyze it, shape it, and make it work smarter for everyone, everywhere. With SAS, you can turn data into answers and ask the questions that move the world forward. SAS, curiosity forever.
AI in the enterprise is all the rage. But put the hype aside. How are today's organizations actually executing and seeing value from enterprise AI? Dataiku is the platform, democratizing access to data and enabling companies to build their own path to enterprise AI. To make enterprise AI a reality, Dataiku provides one simple user interface for data preparation, data exploration, automated machine learning, model deployment, AI monitoring, and management. Dataiku is built for everyone with robust features for both the code-free and the code-first. From business users and analysts to data scientists and engineers, Dataiku makes working with data faster and smarter. Each company's path to enterprise AI looks different, so Dataiku supports the creation of a spectrum of applications. Whether that means building out a self-serve analytics platform or fully operationalized AI integrated with business processes. No matter what the underlying changes in architecture or advancements in technology, Dataiku remains at the center, the cornerstone of data governance and responsible AI. Dataiku's centralized, controlled, and elastic environment fuels exponential growth in the amount of data, the number of AI projects, and the number of people contributing to such projects. Dataiku, for every industry, every use case, and also for everyone. Discover your path to enterprise AI at dataiku.com.
People have got a unique thing about them, which is not only are they awesome technically, but they feel a sense of belonging. We genuinely call ourselves a family. Genic was started out of a desire to start something from scratch that tried to tackle the data market with a new and fresh approach.
Our vision is to never settle on a technology, to be constantly chasing the unicorn.
The space is moving really quickly, and we see it as our job to be aware of new things coming, and when they are good things, be able to introduce them to our clients.
Databricks is the data and AI company. We help data teams solve the world's toughest problems. They can't be solved in silos. They can't be solved by one person. We need all the data, all the science, all the brain power in one place on the only open, unified platform for data management, business analytics, and machine learning.
In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organizations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organizations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts, along with early access to analytics talent who speak the language of business, technology, and mathematics to drive value and navigate change. Through the power of analytics, we are empowering organizations to put their future into their hands.
At SAS, we love bold questions, outrageous and impossible questions. The answers are waiting to be discovered because space isn't the new frontier. Data is. And with the right questions and the right analytics, we make data do amazing things. Like make the world safer, faster, healthier, and kinder. All we have to do is ask the data, analyze it, shape it, and make it work smarter for everyone, everywhere. With SAS, you can turn data into answers and ask the questions that move the world forward. SAS, curiosity forever.
AI in the enterprise is all the rage. But put the hype aside. How are today's organizations actually executing and seeing value from enterprise AI? Dataiku is the platform, democratizing access to data and enabling companies to build their own path to enterprise AI. To make enterprise AI a reality, Dataiku provides one simple user interface for data preparation, data exploration, automated machine learning, model deployment, AI monitoring, and management. Dataiku is built for everyone with robust features for both the code-free and the code-first. From business users and analysts to data scientists and engineers, Dataiku makes working with data faster and smarter. Each company's path to enterprise AI looks different, so Dataiku supports the creation of a spectrum of applications. Whether that means building out a self-serve analytics platform or fully operationalized AI integrated with business processes. No matter what the underlying changes in architecture or advancements in technology, Dataiku remains at the center, the cornerstone of data governance and responsible AI. Dataiku's centralized, controlled, and elastic environment fuels exponential growth in the amount of data, the number of AI projects, and the number of people contributing to such projects. Dataiku, for every industry, every use case, and also for everyone. Discover your path to enterprise AI at dataiku.com.
People have got a unique thing about them, which is not only are they awesome technically, but they feel a sense of belonging. We genuinely call ourselves a family. Genic was started out of a desire to start something from scratch that tried to tackle the data market with a new and fresh approach.
Our vision is to never settle on a technology, to be constantly chasing the unicorn.
The space is moving really quickly, and we see it as our job to be aware of new things coming, and when they are good things, be able to introduce them to our clients.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of our annual Business Analytics Conference. On behalf of Melbourne Business School, I respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional land of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders both past, present, and emerging, and elders from other communities who may be with us today. About a year ago today, Australia went into its first lockdown due to the pandemic. Our government, like many others, asked employees to work from home, if they could. Consumer confidence took a sharp drop and consumer behaviour shifted dramatically to almost 100% online. Organisations could no longer rely on their past data sets and models to forecast the future. They had to create their own crystal ball and change their customer offer to meet their customers where they were now. Michelle from SAS yesterday discussed how their global marketing team moved to a predominantly digital engagement model. Today, in our day focused on customer analytics, we continue to welcome global academics and business leaders to share their journey from 2020 and how they will use what they've learned to tackle 2021 and beyond. SAS is the Centre's founding sponsor and our platinum sponsor for the Business Analytics Conference for the last 4 years. It's my great delight to introduce a member of our Industry Advisory Board and from the Centre's founding sponsor, SAS. Lynette Clunies-Ross is a proven and innovative GM and COO with a unique blend of technology, business and operational expertise. In the last decade, with IBM, SAS, Oracle and Citrix, Lynette has undertaken strategic, global and regional strategy, business operations and transformation assignments based in Shanghai, Sydney and Singapore. And we're so delighted that the restrictions are what they are now that Lynette can join us in the studio today. Lynette returned to SAS in 2019 and now leads up the Australia and New Zealand business as Regional Vice President and Managing Director, overseeing the next phase of SAS's transformation as customers accelerate their own digital transformation plans. With that, I'm delighted to hand over to Lynette.
Thank you, Anita. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to day 2 of the conference. As Anita said, SAS is a founding partner of the Centre for Business Analytics since its inception, and we've been a platinum sponsor of the conference for every year since its inception. This is my second stint on the Industry Advisory Board. It's my second stint at SAS, and I'm just delighted to be here. As I reflect on 2020, 16th of March is exactly the day that we send our people home to work, thinking it was only going to be a couple of weeks. And here we are 1 year later, but I'm really delighted to be here in person with Ujwal and Anita. The theme for today's conference is customer analytics. And to set the scene for that, yesterday you heard from Michelle Eggers, our global leader for marketing sciences, technology and digital experience. Michelle spoke to the 3 S's of marketing science transformation. It starts with S for strategy. If we don't know what our intention is, everything starts from there, including how we treat our customer data. So strategy is what impact are we trying to achieve? The second S was the stack, and that speaks to the technology stack. We all know in marketing technology that there is no one size fits all. At the heart of our stack is Customer Intelligence 360, but we choose best of breed technologies to make this ecosystem work and give our customers the best possible experience. It may surprise some of you that SAS was named as the market leader, not a market leader, but the market leader by Forrester Wave for customer analytics in 2020. And the third S is skills, and that speaks to the people, which without them we wouldn't have the value from analytics and the value of curiosity that we try to engender in our people, and which is the heart of SAS's DNA. Just speaking to 2020 for a minute and the massive disruption. Like everyone, we were forced to pivot to digital only for our events. Our signature Global SAS Forum, which normally is held in March, we deferred to June to give us time to pivot that to a totally virtual online conference. We normally would have 5,000 customers converge on a location in the US. I believe it was Washington last year. When we went digital, our target was to get 10,000 customers attend. We actually achieved 14,000 people attending our conference. We reached 3 times the audience that we would normally have reached. And that is the benefit of going virtual and digital that we might overlook. And being here in Australia, we also did it without the jet lag. At this forum, we announced a global strategic partnership with Microsoft, and have just been named for the 2nd year in a row as the world's most innovative company by Fast Company for that partnership and for our social good endeavors. We have a terrific lineup of speakers today, and I hope today that you'll learn what we all need to do differently to engage our customers in 2021. It's my pleasure to hand over to Ujjwal now. Thank you and enjoy the day.
Thank you very much, Lynette. It's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day. So I won't take very long to introduce him, even though his bio is actually very long. So Raghu Iyengar is a professor at the Wharton School. He's got a chaired professorship there. And you've obviously read his bio, so I'm not going to actually go over the bio in detail. What I am going to do is to tell you something that's not in the bio. So I got to know Raghu back in 2007 when I spent a bit of time at the Wharton School, and he was a very young assistant professor then, incredibly humble, and that was what really struck me. Very accomplished, but very humble. Now that was 2007. 14 years later, Raghu has really made a mark on the world of academia, but working on projects that have a very big and large impact on practice. And I think that's really been the hallmark. And what has stayed with him, though, is his humility. And I think we're just thrilled to have somebody as distinguished as Raghu speak with us today. And he's going to be talking about subscription programs. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Raghu to do his talk. Welcome, Raghu, and to the audience, enjoy.
Thank you so much, Ujjwal. You're very kind. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope for the audience that's here, some of the work that I'm going to be talking about would be immediately applicable. As Ujjwal mentioned, I think some of the things that I like to do are ones which are the interface of practice and academia, and so that's my goal. And so let's get started. So one of the things that I've been working on for the last few years is around pricing. And as many of us here have been thinking about grappling with, as was mentioned earlier, about how to think about pricing in the last year we've been through, subscription programs clearly are things that have really caught people's attention. Why? For a variety of reasons. When you think about subscription programs, there are many of them. So I won't go into that. Ujjwal was very kind to introduce me. I can, if somebody's interested in linking with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, please do so. I'll be very happy to keep in touch. So there are many, many kinds of subscription programs. But the big idea, of course, is that you want to kind of somehow convert one-time purchase into recurring sales stream. And so when you think about subscription programs, you can think about ones with media streaming on the left, replenishment and curation in the middle, and premium benefits on the right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what these are. Media streaming, of course, many of us might be comfortable with. This is a very, very fast-changing space. There are some names here. I'm sure 2 months down the line, the names might be different. So in this talk, I'm not going to talk about media streaming, but I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to connect later offline, however the case might be. I do have a lot of interest in media streaming, but this particular part is not going to be about media streaming. Let me talk about the other ones quickly. So there are many other kinds of replenishment type of subscriptions. What are these? Think about, Dollar Shave Club or Harry's. Think about, Take Your Vitamins Care Of. Many of them have Wharton origins, so I'm going to talk a little bit about them. What's the idea here? The idea here is the following, that, in case, for example, you've forgotten to, get your vitamins, they'll replenish it. In case you forget to get your blades, they'll replenish it. So the idea here is that these programs really are not about any sort of innovation, so to speak, in the sense of you as a customer, suddenly finding something new. It's more about you have forgotten perhaps to get something. They will kind of make sure that you don't forget every month. So it's replenishment without any innovation in the sense of you trying to find joy in something. On the other hand, curations are of a different kind. There are many kinds of curations. So when you think about curation type, there is the Birchbox, for example. There is, of course, Stitch Fix, so on and so forth. Many different kinds of programs where the idea here is kind of delighting the customer in terms of, quote unquote, giving him or her something new. And what might that be? There might be many different kinds. So, some of us here may have been, again, part of Stitch Fix, Trunk Club, and so on. Again, the idea is you as a customer, for instance, if you're part of Stitch Fix, they'll send you some clothes. You can decide to keep some, you can decide to return some. And the idea is over time, they learn your tastes. And on and off, they might give you something that you just, didn't anticipate. And so in that sense, there's always this curiosity, there's always this exploration going on and so on. And so interestingly, I'm not going to talk about either of these. What I'm going to talk about is something called Premium Benefits Program. So let me take an example of this. And this is true actually for many big companies, for example, that may have a large customer base, but they would like to provide their customers, quote unquote, their premium customers with benefits. So let's take the most common example, Amazon Prime. Many of us might be customers of Amazon. Of course, you can buy on Amazon without being Prime customers. So what that literally means is that, of course, you can go ahead and buy on Amazon whenever you want. No problem at all. But if you buy into Amazon Prime, you can obviously get a lot of other benefits as well. So when I talk about premium benefits, you can think of it as paid loyalty programs, where literally you're paying upfront, so to speak, as a customer to become a member of a program that comes with benefits. Now, what's interesting about these programs is many large companies offer this. So in fact, you see a lot more of these kinds of programs for larger companies. In fact, the curation type of companies I talked about, the replenishment ones I talked about, are usually startups. These programs, on the other hand, paid loyalty programs, premium benefit programs, these are ones that much larger companies can do so. Why? Because they already have a large set of customers. Now they would like to curate their program for perhaps more premium customers, so to speak. And there are many different kinds of the typical structure is of this kind. Again, what you notice is, again, if you think in the middle, Amazon Prime, these numbers are from the US in the middle, $119. What's the idea here? The idea here is the following. Let's say you become an Amazon Prime customer, you pay upfront. In this case, it's an annual fee. You get free shipping, pricing discounts, you get streaming, all kinds of things. And there are numerous books being written about how successful Amazon Prime has been in terms of attracting new customers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. What I'll focus up a little bit more is on the cost side as well. Now, what are some things that you want to think about? Yeah? When you think about some of these questions, what is the causal impact of this program? How much is it worth? What is the true impact of this program? And I've underlined the word causal for a specific reason, and we'll talk about that. The second thing, of course, is how do customers differ? What is the heterogeneity, so to speak, among customers? Think about Amazon numbers, and I'll give you a little bit of them. You typically hear the average numbers. Of course, averages can be very misleading. And so I'd like to know, ideally, how do customers differ? And why would I want to know that? Because in some sense, I would like to know if I'm thinking about opening up this program and getting more customers, which are the right customers to get. And finally, when you think about the program benefits itself, which program benefits matter? How much do they matter? And is there any effect beyond benefits per se? Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the context of a beauty care provider. As I always joke to people, and if you can see me right now, this is not by chance. It takes a lot of work. And so, beauty is clearly something that's important for a lot of people. I'm going to talk about that. But let me talk a little bit more before I head into that specific context. Let me talk a little bit about why offer these kinds of programs per se, and some numbers from Amazon. And again, these numbers are self-stated. There's a company out there which basically surveys Amazon Prime members and non-Prime members. So these are survey numbers. If any of you have contacts with Amazon, please reach out to me. I would love to know the real numbers. Here are some numbers. On the left is what's the annual revenues from an Amazon Prime customer. These are from the US. And on the right are annual revenues from a non-Prime customers. What do we see here? $1,300 is typically Amazon Prime. $700 is typically Amazon non-Prime members. So these are customers who are just buying on Amazon, but they're not Prime customers. So you could speculate, for instance, that $600, that's the difference. That's probably what Amazon Prime is worth. And I'll come back to this particular number. But not surprisingly, let's go down. 25 versus 17, so a lot more purchases happening on Amazon. And what's also interesting is a massively high retention rate, and that's why Amazon Prime, again, if you think of a customer lifetime value, hugely important. And there's a lot of stickiness. And so this 82% basically says that people were asked, would they shop on Amazon Prime, even if there was a price premium for that same product, and 82% said yes, they would. So that's kind of interesting. It tells you that even beyond any of these other benefits, there's a lot of stickiness which comes along with these kinds of services. So in some sense, what's the problem with the comparison that I just made, which is the 1,300 minus 700? And that's the crux of this particular project I worked on with a company. One way to think about it is as visual as possible. Is it really the impact of the subscription per se, or is it really about the people? So one can think of the following way. When people think about becoming Amazon Prime subscribers, they're not thinking of it just by chance. They're thinking about how much they spend with Amazon. Does it make sense? Does it, in some sense, should we become one or not become one? There's an upfront fee. So put differently, if you simply compare the 1,300 versus 700, the Amazon Prime versus non-Prime, you're simply comparing apples to oranges. So the left-hand side is kind of suggesting that it's the impact of the subscription. The right-hand side suggesting is that, look, Prime members and non-Prime members are different. And you can't simply compare them. And because doing so is just comparing apples to oranges. And so more broadly, when you think about it, if you think about subscription programs, and many of you who are attending may have subscription programs in your own companies. So when you think about subscription program, what's the key issue? The key issue is, obviously, you want to offer the program to all customers. Some people take it and some people don't take it. So those are the members on the left-hand side, non-members on the right-hand side. And you might end up comparing what's the amount of money that they give you. So the Amazon Prime kind of comparison compared members with non-members, the $1,300 versus $700, and made that comparison to then be able to say, is that the impact of the program? What's the issue? The issue is that this overall impact of the program, in some sense, subsumes the fact that members and non-members are different. So that's the idea of self-selection. So put differently, as I go forward more into the context we'll deal with, it's not the Amazon context. I'll give you a little bit more clearly. I think it was a good one to promote it and talk about the program, the problem, but it's not the Amazon data that we have. I wish we did. So the story is the following. If you simply look at purchases from members versus non-members, what are you doing? In some sense, you're confounding two things, quote unquote, adding it up. It's the true impact of the program, plus the fact that members and non-members are different from each other. How do we separate it out? That's what I'm going to talk about. And of course, we'll talk about why is it useful to separate it out and all the other things which are managerially important. So let's get on with it. Here's the context. Beauty company in Asia. It was about a $50 annual fee. Again, I can't go into the details of this company. Obviously, we signed a confidentiality agreement. I've changed the numbers as well into a dollar context so that nobody can try to speculate what this company is. It's a very large company. If you're familiar with Sephora, for instance, it's not Sephora, but think of it like Sephora. Okay, so it's not Sephora, but think of it like Sephora. And what's the idea here? The idea here was that for a $50 annual fee, they were giving gift cards. And look at the amount of the gift card, $50. I'll come back to that in a second. And just like Amazon Prime, they were very inspired by that. They did free shipping, free samples, special promotion rate, all kinds of stuff. Let me come back to the gift card story. What is interesting is that while you're spending $50 with this company to quote unquote buy into this program, the minute you buy into it, they were actually giving $50 back. Now you might say, what are they doing here? They are basically giving you back all the money. What's the point? The point is that they've made your money non-fungible. So in some sense, quote unquote, you have the sunk cost. You've paid into this program, and $50 you may have spent with them and their competitors are now all quote unquote being spent with them because you signed up upfront with it. We'll talk more about that. So here's the context, here's the data. I think, as we started this day today, it's all about data. So in some sense, what we want to make sure is we have very good data as much as possible when you try to think about what's happening with members and non-members. I just got a little reminder that I have about 5 minutes or so I'm going to speed it a little bit. But key takeaway here is, as much as possible, have a good time window of before and after data. So data is premium. When you start thinking about coming up with a program, make sure you're collecting data not just after the program, but before the program. Here is one chart that kind of showcases, for example, what's the impact of the subscription. This is focusing specifically on people in April. These are people who became quote unquote members in April 2016. Notice a very big bump. But of course, I had speculated before, this big bump can be because of members versus non-members. So what's the million-dollar question? How do you control for self-selection? Now, in the remaining 3-4 minutes that I have, what I'd like to showcase here is how can good methods, machine learning in this case, help you with this problem? And this is where, in some sense, machine learning of the following kind, random forests, comes in. I love the person on the left. You may know him, Ryan Gosling. The person on the right apparently is an accountant in Germany. What's the overall method? Finding lookalikes. For every Ryan Gosling who becomes a member, find somebody else who is a non-member but looks exactly like Ryan Gosling till that person became a member. And so obviously, when you start thinking about it in that way, what you're trying to do in some sense is, as much as possible, using data from before the subscription, before the thing started, and a lot of data. So the more data you have, the better it is for you. So in this case, we worked very closely with the company to figure out what the data might be and how should we collect that data. What did we find? What we found was, of course, there was a different impact over time, but here's the interesting part. About 85% of the impact was true impact, and the remaining 15% was all because of the apple versus oranges comparison. So to me, if you have to take away one thing from this particular session, is think very carefully about the data you're collecting. If you're starting out anything new, any new subscription program, I think it's great to start out, but don't start collecting data only after the program begins. And that's what many companies end up doing. Think carefully about the data you'd like to collect before the program begins, because that gives you an opportunity to find those lookalikes. That gives you an opportunity to compare quote unquote apples to apples as compared to apples to oranges. So in the remaining time before Ujjwal comes in, I'm going to just show you one quick chart. Customers differed a lot. There was a huge difference among customers. So the second big takeaway I'd like you to have is, don't focus on just average numbers. So the 1300 versus 700 that I told you before, those were averages. Averages can be misleading. Averages represent nobody. So in this case, for example, there was a 5% of customers who were purchasing a lot, but there were also a large number of customers that weren't. So thinking carefully about what the heterogeneity is in your database becomes quite important. And finally, when you put together the cost side of things, there was only the revenue side. We actually were working very closely with this company to kind of figure out what the operational costs were. When you put that together, what did we find? A large number of customers actually were not profitable. This might be surprising to a lot of people, but why did this happen? Because as soon as you start giving free shipping, you start giving all these benefits, you need to start taking your own costs into account. So start looking carefully, not just on the revenue side, and those are the numbers that we end up hearing a lot, and those are great numbers. But with more revenue, for some customers, you have greater costs. So net, what you should always keep thinking about is, what exactly is the data you're collecting before? Think very, very carefully, not just about averages, but also the heterogeneity over time. And as much as possible, drill down into the costs of serving customers. The more you do, the more you'll have an understanding of who's truly profitable and who are the customers you would like to get. So with that said, I'll stop here. I'm open for questions. Thank you so much. So that's a nice background out there. This is not Wharton, Philadelphia. This is Wharton, San Francisco, but still it's a good background.
Well, thank you very much, Raghu. That was terrific. I loved the focus on causal impact, and I think that's really the critical thing. I'm going to just ask a couple of questions around generalizability, because obviously you've got one case here, beauty products, very specific. And I was actually reflecting, Raghu, I am a member of a subscription program with a winery. And I think and as I signed up to it, one of the things that concerned me was that they get you to sign up for a whole year and you can't sort of pull out. So there's a pretty significant sunk cost effect there. And how do you disentangle that sunk cost effect in a study of subscription program impact? And if you could just talk about that in a few minutes, that would be terrific.
Great point. In our ideal case, for example, in this case, it would have been great, for instance, if we had worked with the company to try out different prices of different subscription programs. You could imagine, for example, an entry level, a medium level, a premium level. Of course, for the company, it was a little bit hard to do because this was the first time they were doing it. And so they wanted to start out with one program and see how it does. But those are some ways in which one can think about it. Which is, if, for example, in your winery, in the example that you were giving, I'm also part of a subscription with winery as well. And they have like an entry-level program where you might get, for example, 2 or 3 bottles per month. A medium level where you get slightly more bottles, and perhaps even a visit to the winery, and things of that nature. So as if you have multi-tiered programs, then you can start seeing that people who sign up for the most premium tier, who are sinking in more money, do you see, quote unquote, a higher impact of sunk cost versus not?
No, that's really good. Now I've got a ton of questions, but look, I think we can touch base separately. But our audience actually has several questions. They're just coming through really quickly. Let me actually start with a question from Sean St. Mark, who's a former student of mine, but now works for one of our corporate partners, National Australia Bank. So his question is: have you done any research around cashback effects and how they play out in this kind of an environment?
Great point. I haven't personally done it, but this company actually does offer cashback, so thank you for bringing it up. I'll suggest actually, I know a couple of people in London Business School who have done work on cashback. So if, Ujjwal, maybe we can connect later as well. I'm happy to forward a study that they had done, which starts looking at, and they've done it with a very large provider, which had different types of cashback across many different categories. And so they were able to see, for example, that if you take a cashback for one, and what do you spend it on later? Is it back to the same category? Is it a different category? All of those wonderful effects. So Anya Lambret is one of the authors of that study, and there are 2 other authors as well. So happy to connect with you and then send that paper forward.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Raghu. We've got a question here from Kirsten Schneider, and there are 2 questions around machine learning and the use of machine learning. So the first one's from Kirsten. Are you seeing many companies that use machine learning for customer cohort analysis, or is this a very underutilized area in your experience?
Great point. And so, I think there are 2 extremes. One is I do see many companies, and this might be more my biased perspective, so to keep that into account. I do see many companies, when you ask them how are they doing things, machine learning. It's like, okay, so why are you doing it? I don't know, everybody else is doing it. And so I think we need to kind of make sure that you're not killing a fly with a bazooka. So that's how I kind of, you're using machine learning for the purpose of what it's meant for. What does that mean? You want to make sure that any of these models require a lot of historical data. So that data exists. You need to make sure that there haven't been very big changes in the environment. There were many companies dial back a year ago when all of the pandemic unfortunately started. March 2020 was a very big kind of situation for many companies. Why? Because they were not able to use the models that they had before. So I think it's important to figure out where does machine learning actually come in and where is it perhaps not as useful. And so indeed, cohort analysis, it's rapidly becoming popular as companies start to kind of dig into their historical data and see that there is actually a gold mine in there to think carefully about customer behavior and be able to predict going forward.
Well, thank you for that, Raghu. The next question is actually very much related to the former question, and then I've got one more question on causality after that. So this question is, for the example you described, this comes from Chris Lloyd, one of my colleagues here at MBS. For the example you described, the data structure appears to be a difference in different design, and that seems quite obvious. Is it really necessary to use machine learning to estimate causal effect? I suspect your answer will be that you want to estimate the causal effect heterogeneity, and that's why you use machine learning. But if you could just elaborate on that, that would be terrific.
Great point. No, I think that's very well put, which is, indeed, a difference in difference design, of course, is a very common way of doing it. There were two reasons why we thought machine learning would be a good application here. One is, thinking about this apples to apples comparison. So if you simply compare members and non-members before, after, even before, they might be quite different. So I didn't get enough time to discuss that, but happy to chat more so, again, offline, where they were actually quite dramatically different even before they started the program. And why is that? Because they're already thinking about the program. So they're looking at their behavior is actually quite different from non-members. So to be able to, quote unquote, compare the apples to apples, you could do, let's say, a propensity matching, you could do all of that, but that also requires an underlying model per se. The good news about random forest is it's quite non-parametric. So you could, again, rely on the non-parametric part, but it requires a lot of data. And so that's the trade-off. If you have a lot of data, you have the luxury of data, you can go in this way. And then the next one is exactly what you just pointed out, Ujjwal, which is what you would like to see is not just give an average number. We would love to have a heterogeneous treatment effect using these random forests. So that was the other reason to do so.
Well, thank you for that. I've got a couple of more questions. I've got tons, by the way, but we have time only for a couple of more questions. The next one is, again, a little bit technical. What methods did you use to deal with endogeneity? And if you could just briefly talk about what endogeneity is and then talk about what methods you used.
Yeah, so great point. So I think in this case, for example, one, endogeneity, self-selection, however you'd want to characterize it, is that, by definition, when people are thinking about, think about winery and Ujjwal, Ujjwal looks like a person who loves wine, and think about somebody else who doesn't love wine. Well, guess who's more likely to go to the wine subscription? Ujjwal. Well, so already you're thinking about self-selection. And so in some sense, the issue, of course, is that there are two ways around it. One is you can have a formal model for it, which is you might say, what do I know about Ujjwal, all the information about it, and then come up with a model, how likely is this person going to join? We didn't go that route. You could go that route. It's a more structural modeling tradition. On the other hand, the route that we went to is use as much data as possible on Ujjwal before he joins. And in this case, we have about 75 odd variables. So that's quite a good amount of observable data. And then try to find the counterpart of Ujjwal who didn't become a member, matching, quote unquote, on all those variables. So that's our way of accounting for self-selection and endogeneity in this case, such that we can find for every member or non-member that would, quote unquote, match as much as possible on these variables. And the random forest way of doing so allows us to match based on covariates, not just in the model per se.
Well, thank you for that. I do have, a couple of really pressing questions, but one of them I'm going to ask, and if we have time, we'll go to the second one. One of them is a really good one. How does the subscription thinking change when you're selling a service and not a product?
Very good point. And actually, in this case, I've had a lot of experience working on service pricing per se. And so in some sense, when you think about it, one of the things that you have to start thinking about is when you think about products, in this case, for example, there's a lot of transaction cost. There's a cost of serving the customer. And specifically in this case, it was about shipping. I mean, one of the reasons why most people were not profitable was because they were buying a lot, quote unquote, but very, kind of small amounts every time. So you're paying for shipping all the time, you as a company. When you think about a service, software as a service, for instance, perhaps the cost to serve might be dramatically lower. But on the flip side, acquiring that customer might be much, much harder as well. And so you have to, quote unquote, balance off the customer lifetime value when you start thinking about who are the customers that are best to have for the software as a service, and how frequently would they be transacting with us.
Well, thank you very much for that, Raghu. It's been terrific. I know that I didn't actually address all of the questions here or ask all of the questions that came through. But what I would encourage you to do, the audience to do, is if you have more questions, please reach out to Raghu on his LinkedIn, and I'm sure he'd be more than willing to answer the questions. As I said, humility is his hallmark. He will find the time to answer your questions. And so Raghu, thank you so much for being part of this conference. And we can't wait to have you here in person when travel opens up. So look forward to having you over at some stage, Raghu. Thank you.
Thank you, Ujjwal. Thank you, everybody, to the audience as well. Wonderful questions. As Ujjwal said, please email me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to connect and chat more about it. Thank you so very much. Have a wonderful conference as well.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to pass it over to Wendy Stops, the chair of our Industry Advisory Board, to introduce our next speaker, Lisa Ronson. Over to Wendy now.
Good morning, and thank you, Ujjwal. I have the great pleasure this morning of introducing Lisa Ronston, as Ujjwal just mentioned. So Lisa is an award-winning marketing executive with over 20 years of experience across multiple Australian and international brands. She has a track record of building strong consumer brands, leading high-performing teams, and growing retail sales and market share. Lisa joined the Coles Group in May 2019. As Chief Marketing Officer, Lisa is responsible for leading the organisation's marketing, brand and media strategies, sponsorships and events, customer insights and analytics, and in-store promotion. So very relevant to our conference at the moment. Prior to joining Coles, Lisa worked across several brands and sectors, including Carlton and United Breweries, Visa International, Telstra, David Jones, Westpac Group, and Tourism Australia. She was recognised as the #1 Chief Marketing Officer in Australia, winning both the 2018 Marketer of the Year Award from the Australian Marketing Institute and also being named as the #1 CMO in the 2018 CMO 50 Awards from CMO Magazine Australia. Lisa and her team also won Marketing Team of the Year, Campaign of the Year, Best PR and Social Campaigns of the Year, and 10 Cannes Lions Awards in 2018. Most recently, Lisa won the Marketing Award for B&T's Women in Media Awards, recognising her as a trusted leader not only from her direct colleagues, but the wider marketing and media industries. Lisa is an active member of the Australian marketing industry, including writing regularly for the AFR. She's an Australian Association of National Advertisers board member and Australian Advertising Standards board member. She also takes part in several mentoring programs. Lisa holds a graduate diploma in management with honours in marketing from the Macquarie School of Management and bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Western Sydney. Lisa is also studying an MBA at MGSM. I have the pleasure of working with Lisa at Coles, and I know you'll find her presentation insightful and interesting. She's a very bubbly presenter. So now over to you, Lisa, and we'll come back for Q&A at the end.
Oh, thank you so much, Wendy, for that lovely introduction. I'll try not to disappoint, and I hope you will. It's good to see your face. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and I think this is a really passionate topic for me because you'll see on the next slide that I've had the privilege of working for so many great Australian and international brands, and a lot of people question that from a marketing perspective because often marketers will sort of stick to one category and move through their careers in that category. But for me, the focus on the customer and the topic that we're talking about today in terms of being data-led and insight-driven, leading to business growth, has always been really important to me and has really helped me transition from one industry to the other. And they're quite diverse. You can see up there from breweries to Telstra to Westpac to tourism to where I am now at supermarkets. It's always held me in good stead to always focus on the customer, always look at the data, but more importantly, take what the insights are from that data. And before we sort of really get into it today, I just wanted to cast our minds back, and you'll see on the next slide that pre-COVID, Coles was in a really good position. We'd launched our strategy for winning in the second century, and we were really focused on the customer, our customer metrics to drive business growth. And you can see the quote there from our Q3 sales. Our supermarket sales trajectory was on a really solid path, and also our NPS was improving dramatically. And that's because we're more customer-centric and engaging with our customers more than we ever had in recent history. They were really engaging with us. They were engaging with the problems of theirs that we recognised
through our research and data analytics program, and we're trying to solve for, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on one of the most successful ones in a moment. But pre-COVID, we were in a really solid position because we were focused on the data and the insights around our customers. Now, about a year ago, almost to the day, on the 3rd and 4th of March last year, suddenly, you can see on the next slide, toilet paper became worth more than gold. And that was, you know, whilst we sort of chuckle about the whole toilet paper issue at the, you know, now, back at the time, what it was representing was Australians and, you know, global citizens alike were really anxious. They were going into a period of uncertainty, and what they were effectively trying to do, I mean, there's lots of theories over the toilet paper theory and why it's first, and it's always the first to go, but it was all about control and trying to control a small space, whether that be your home, bathroom, whatever it might be, and looking at also what are the cues of what other customers were doing. And because that anxiety level was just so high, consumers were trying to control things. So Coles, as the brand that we are, that connect with so many Australians day in, day out, we play a really important part in so many communities around Australia, and the interactions between our team members and our customers is so important. We had to take a leadership role, and part of that was just managing our logistics to make sure that we could stick to our purpose and sustainably feed all Australians so they could live healthier and happier lives. And that's really, really critical in this situation, because you can see on the next slide, as a retailer, we are so far planned out. You know, I was reviewing some packaging just a couple of weeks ago that will go in store in Christmas 2022. So we have a very comprehensive and well thought through calendar. Now, the world changed basically instantly within the course of a couple of days. So it wasn't really an option to stay the course of the calendar. We had to go and continue to promote things like Easter in the way that we normally would and will this year, because consumers just couldn't get access to the things that they were normally getting access to. They couldn't connect with family and friends in the way that they always could. So things were really uncertain. So what we had to do was really stick to the foundations of our strategy, and we were making decisions in such a truncated time period. Instead of, you know, going through weeks and months to make it quite a big decision, often we were making these decisions very, very frequently. And you would have heard, you know, my boss, Stephen Kane, talk about that. We'd meet twice a day as a leadership team. We'd look at the data and the insights that we had available to us. And we do have a lot. So looking at just the data and insight capabilities just at Coles, we have got several data sources that we were looking at on a day-by-day, sometimes hour-by-hour basis, because consumers were changing that frequently. When it would normally, customers would change in the course of maybe a month, a quarter, a year, it was changing from morning to night, from day to day, obviously. So we had to be really focused on all of our different data sets, whether it be our sales data, our market share data, some of our customer panel data like Coles Circle. We've got 18,000 Coles customers that we pose different questions to, different scenarios, and we get instant feedback. So we could check to see that some of the decisions we were making around how we were interacting with the community to keep our customers safe and to keep our team members safe was absolutely paramount, and living by that purpose that I referred to before. So we looked at all of the different analytics tools that we had available for us, whether that be from our customer panel, social listening, customers phoning us up. That was a really rich source of information for us, so that we could see what was in the hearts and minds and the behaviours of all Australians, no matter where they were in the community. That was really critical. And then also to supplement that, we looked to some of our global partners, which you can see there, some of the biggest brands in the world, to get what was going on internationally. And they were also doing a lot of robust surveys. Now, that led to a lot of data, obviously. So my research and insights team had a lot of data at their disposal during this time. But what was absolutely critical, and this sounds really obvious, but when you're swimming in data in an uncertain time and you're making decisions so quickly, taking the insights out of that and putting it into themes or buckets that really matter, that we could then action our decision making on, because you can't make a whole lot of decisions on reams and reams of data. It has to be pulled together into the most critical and insightful pieces of information that are confronting our customers and our team members at the time, and it was real time, as I've mentioned before. So we noticed consumer behaviour was obviously changing rapidly. That was very, very well documented. And I was just meeting with someone this morning and we were talking about the use of the word unprecedented. The use of the word unprecedented was unprecedented, but it really was. I mean, consumer behaviour was changing so dramatically, and we sort of bucketed into 5 key themes: entertaining at home and rediscovering the joy of cooking, particularly in markets like Victoria where we were locked down for so long. The evening meal became the entertainment for the family. And also with the panic buying, after the toilet paper came the pasta, the rice, the flour. And there was a whole lot of Australians that had a stocked pantry and had absolutely no clue how to cook from scratch. So we had a role to play there, and I'll get into that in a moment. The acceleration of online adoption. That's not the case for just Coles. It was obviously globally. That had been increasing at a rate dramatically prior to COVID, and it just went to the next level during COVID. There was an increased focus on seeking value. Now, value is more than just price. Value is all about the product, the quality, the experience they get when they're purchasing that product, whether that be online or in store, and obviously the price, and wrapping all of those things together. There was a heightened focus on health and well-being. I think, for those of us that maybe put on a few Corona kilos during the time of doing that scratch cooking and maybe doing a little bit too much and spending a bit too much time in the pantry, there was an increased focus on the health and the well-being. And also in the face of a pandemic, we do tend to look at our health as being the most important thing, as it is, and the health of our families and our friends. And there was an increased importance of community, trust and brand. Australian consumers increasingly turn to trust and having trust in particularly Australian products and supporting Australian, supporting local, whether that be supporting your local community who were doing it really, really tough, or buying Australian to try and help get the economy going, because that was obviously in the back of people's minds, post the pandemic or through the pandemic, how we're going to get back to normal and get our economy going again. So consumers were dramatically changing. And there was lots of other themes that came out, but they were the 5 big ones for us. So one of the ones, entertaining at home and rediscovering the joy of cooking. This was a really important one for us because we obviously play a big role in, feeding all Australians. And we wanted to help them through that period, as I said, to help them rediscover ways to make new things, because we'd launched a platform pre-COVID, What's for Dinner, and this came out of some very simple food diaries that between 3 and 6 o'clock at night, a lot of us get this major anxiety of what am I going to cook for dinner? Am I just going to do the spag bowl again? I want to do something different for my family and friends. And so we launched this platform in September of 2019, and it just connected with Australians just to take a really simple anxiety and to make a bit of fun out of it and to suggest different meals on a Monday, Tuesday, something different for the weekend when you've got a bit more time. And so during COVID, what we found, I was chatting to one of our media agencies, and this is a well-told story, I think, on a Saturday afternoon. And I was like, what are we going to do? Our customers' pantries are full. They want to do something different with it. How can we, use What's for Dinner? And then by Tuesday night, we'd worked with our agency in Channel 7, actually, and What's for Dinner became a nightly segment in the Channel 7 news. And again, it just really resonated with customers, but I've got a quick little video I can share with you.
Hi, I'm Matt Stone from Oak Ridge. Like me, so many chefs around Australia had been stood down from their jobs. At the time, we were wondering what we were going to do for work, and I even messaged Lisa about stacking shelves. Coles gave us a platform on Channel 7 News every night to get back in the kitchen and cook some of our favourite meals and inspire others.
Hi, I'm Jo from Oak Ridge Winery in the Yarra Valley. I was affected by the forced COVID shutdowns. The work that we were able to do with Coles and the What's for Dinner campaign truly supported us through this difficult time. They didn't just help support us, they helped support many chefs throughout Australia who were getting back into the kitchen.
I've got your What's for Dinner recipe and you are going to love it.
Let's get cooking.
Today we're cooking chicken legs.
Spinach and ricotta caramelli pasta.
My chicken one-pot wonder with sweet potato and currants.
You guys are going to love this one, I promise.
My onions have softened. In go the peppers.
So full of flavour and goodness.
Super affordable, really easy to do.
Wanting to connect and buy online, but they hadn't done it before. And so that posed a different problem to us around how do we educate those cohorts of customers that would normally come into our store, but were probably a bit more fearful to come into our stores on how they can shop online. And so again, a different marketing term, but we created a short video to show those customers how to shop online. So this was just another example how we tapped into an insight around the hesitation to shop online, although they wanted to shop online because they just weren't familiar with it. So we can play the video.
Hi, I'm here from Coles to show you it's really easy to shop with Coles online from home. Even if you've never done it before, head to coles.com.au/shop and follow these 5 simple steps. Step 1. Once you are there, click the sign up button. Step 2. Create an account. You will need to enter your name, date of birth, address and email, and create a password for the account. Then you're ready to start shopping. Step 3. Doing the shopping. To shop, you can search for items individually in the search bar. Or if you click the Everything button, you can search in different sections, like the bread and bakery section, or the meat, seafood and deli section, just like in a store. When you find the items you need, click to add them to your trolley. When you have finished shopping, it's time to check out. Step 4. Check out and delivery. Here you can choose to collect your groceries at a store with our click and collect option. If you choose click and collect, you need to select which store and a date and a time you would like to collect. Or if it's easier, you can choose to have them delivered to your home. With home delivery, select a date and delivery time frame. Finally, step 5 is payment. To complete your order, you can pay with credit card or with PayPal. Please enter your details carefully so we can complete your order. And that's it. Our experienced team will prepare your order and get it ready for collection, or deliver it in refrigerated trucks so it arrives to your home fresh. So the fresh is fresh and the frozen is frozen. It really is easy to shop with Coles online at home.
Again, a really simple insight just to be helpful to our customers again at a really anxious time, and it's just a practical insight which we acted on and got great feedback. So the third one I spoke about is an increase focus on seeking value. And this was intersected with the other trend of consumers seeking a lot more of their information digitally. We all knew that pre-2020, the move to the digital adoption was great across not just Australia, but around the world. That's well documented. But it went to, as I said before, the complete next level. So what we did, just on the next slide, you'll see some stats around a 50% increase in online grocery sales, 63% of consumers were buying more groceries online, and 93% of decisions were influenced by social media. So what we did was we took something that we'd been publishing and walking to Australian households for more than 30 years, which was our weekly catalogue, which included our specials. And what we did was we actually stopped walking that catalogue, but we made it a better customer experience because we didn't just show the specials digitally through Coles & Co, which we launched late last year, in September of last year, when we stopped walking the catalogue. We could show meal inspiration of what you do with those specials. We could show the farmers of where those products came from. We could profile a lot of the different partners and suppliers that we have at Coles. So consumers, as I said, the increased focus on health and wellbeing, they were increasingly curious about where their food was coming from. So through Coles & Co, we could represent great value to show specials, inspiration, show where the food comes from, our farmers, and a lot of the great sustainability stories that we invest in at Coles to bring it to a single unified platform of Coles & Co. And that has had such a great response from our customers to take something that we'd been doing for 30 years and really lean into how they were changing. You know, they wanted to get a whole lot more information in a collective spot through Coles & Co, and we delivered that to provide a better value proposition for our customers. Now, the other one I talked about was a heightened focus on health and wellbeing, and I've mentioned that a few times now, but our operations team through, and still do, have worked so closely with the state and federal governments to determine how we can keep our team members and our customers safe in store. And so that has been of paramount importance to us and our decision making, as it always is, but it did take on a different dimension during COVID. So there was a really great collaboration between our team, who, you know, get trucks, and I'm not one to talk on operations. What they do is just phenomenal. And, you know, as I mentioned, during those peak buying days, the operations team were basically dealing with a Christmas every single day, and we normally get 12 months to prepare for Christmas, to get stock around the country and make sure Australians were well fed. So we got some great results on the back of how we were working to keep everyone in the community safe. And you could see that through some of the results of our surveys and things like that. There was a much heightened awareness of Coles and the role we play in the community, and we did get rebranded by our customers as an essential service through all of that work that we all collectively did, but led by our operations team. And the last one that I just wanted to talk about in terms of the trends was the increased importance of community, trust, and on brand. So one of the things that we look to is, through all of those different data sources, was how do our customers see us now? And it did transition through the period of the first and second lockdowns in COVID. We did take on a different role in the community. And so effectively, as I mentioned before, our customers did rebrand us through some of the simple initiatives that we did through COVID. And one of the ones that really resonated was Community Hour. And this was, just to the next slide, you can see it was an hour that we opened our stores every morning, Monday through Friday, to let the elderly come in Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays for those frontline essential workers that couldn't get to the supermarket at any time. They were our police, our army, our doctors, our nurses, and all of those people that were dealing with the pandemic at the front line could come in and have an hour just to them so that they could do their shopping, and so we could make sure that we were, again, fulfilling that purpose to sustainably feed all Australians so they can live healthier and happier lives. And we were very fortunate that our Community Hour was named the best brand initiative by our consumers, by Australian consumers during COVID-19, which was terrific because our store teams worked really, really hard on that. And so what we also did was we wanted to embrace and celebrate the role we played in the lives of our customers, not only during COVID, but pre-COVID and hopefully coming out of COVID soon. So what we did was we actually repositioned our brand during that time on the back of our customers repositioning us. And I'll just go to a quick video to show what we did with the repositioning of the Coles brand.
I feel like going back home right now while the mangoes are ripe. starting to bloom.
This is how I would do it.
And a bluebird has all you fight. Hey mom, I can just taste your fish and rice. I'm coming back home to you. Connect the base of the city life. Should I be dreaming in bed? Lazy breeze flowing through your mind.
This year, we're valuing the little things more than ever, because they may well turn out to have been the big things all along. Coles. Value the Australian way.
So I guess in summary, what our data and insights taught us during 2020 was that as Australians, we value our families, our communities, we value good food, and we value our land. And that's what led to the repositioning of Coles to be Coles Value the Australian Way. So that was kind of the ultimate use of data and analytics to reposition a brand. So on that, I'll say thank you, and I think I'm going to hand back to Wendy.
Thanks, Lisa. That was great. 12 months has just gone by so quickly. To remember all of those things that happened in 12 months has been a good tap back into the memory. I have a few questions coming through here, but I want to start with the first one here that I think Yutong Song asked. Can you explain or offer examples of social listening? You talk about social listening on one of the earlier slides, and I think you're just looking for some examples or explain a little bit more what you mean by that.
Yeah, that's where we look at, a couple of things. We listen to what the sentiment is of some of our different initiatives. And that can be really broad, whether it was some of the bigger initiatives like Coles Community Hour. What was our customers' response? What were they talking about on social? What were they saying to their friends? Is it a good thing? What do they want to see more of? What's not resonating with them? And we do that with different products. We do it with different advertising. We do it with some sustainability initiatives. So all of the things we do, we just wanted to check. We want to check what our customers are feeling. And often social media is such a rich source of what those feelings are, whether they be positive or negative, because as you know, we use Net Promoter Score as our key customer metric around would our customers advocate for us? Would they tell their friend to shop at Coles? And social listening is a really rich source of information to see, what people are really thinking and feeling out there, because they do tend to share on social a lot of those feelings. So we just want to get a guide on how well we're doing or not, so we can pivot to change.
And so just continuing on the theme of social media, Melissa Wu has asked the question that you said from your presentation that 90% of buying decisions are influenced by social media. And so wondering if you can share what change did you make on social media marketing to engage customers post-COVID?
Well, in terms of social media marketing, it's really just taking the campaign or the message that you want to share with customers and just making it fit for purpose for that particular media. So shorter, sharper messaging, more engaging messaging, straight up front. So there's some sort of rules around social marketing. But the key thing for social media and why it's so important, and why it was probably a little bit more important during COVID, is because we couldn't see our friends and family to talk about things, to say, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried this new product? And that's a very old form of advocacy. It's word of mouth. Media is just a digital form of word of mouth. So word of mouth is never going to go away. It's always important because someone can tell you something, but if it's your best friend or one of your family members telling you something, whether that be on the phone or in social media, it becomes a lot more important in your purchasing decision.
And so just going back a little bit to your customer insight engine that you talked about early on, over the course of 2020, obviously things went up and down, and some states were clearly being affected more severely, like Victoria, than other states were. So how did you change your reliance on each of those channels over the course of 2020?
Well, one of the things we always do to supplement the data and the insights that we get, whether it be from customers or social media, is we talk to our teams in markets about them to validate them. And that is a really critical step that I probably didn't reinforce enough, because they're there on the ground. And through COVID, people in Queensland, we've got relatives in Queensland, they'd ring and say, well, why aren't you going out at the weekend? And you're like, well, because we're not allowed to. So it was like a different world between Queensland and Victoria, or, Northern Territory. So our teams on the ground and our operations teams were really critical in validating some of the different information. But we just made sure that we doubled down and made sure we had enough sample to be representative, because all of the states and territories were so very different. And I can honestly say, in my time as a marketer, I've never seen, except for maybe selling beer, I've never seen such vast differences in customers in the different states. They were, in some parts, completely different. So making sure we had the sample and making sure we kept really connected in with our ops teams that were on the ground was critical, because that's such a rich source of data and insights from those teams.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I guess tying into that, one of the other questions is around how we saw the big shift in staples that consumers bought, and how were you able to change some of your predictive models on what to stock? And obviously, how quickly were you able to then adapt those models to try and get into a more, if there is such a thing, COVID normal?
Well, yeah, one of the things that we did was through some of those international data sources I talked about, we got a lot of rich information for some of the markets that had gone before us around going from the toilet paper to the pasta to the rice. And then what our buyers did was looked at some of those trends internationally and made sure that we then worked with our supply chain and our suppliers to ensure that we had enough stock. So with toilet paper, we were working directly with the toilet paper manufacturers, a lot of which are here in Australia, in South Australia. I think people didn't realise that at the time, that, the factories were going 24/7 to make sure that we could increase supply. So some of it was working with the insights we were getting from those different data sources, working with suppliers that had experience in other markets. A lot of our suppliers are global and they work with a lot of different markets. So it was a combination, again, triangulating a number of different data sources to try and make sure we had supply of the next thing that may have got panic bought or anxiety around not getting access to.
Well, thanks, Lisa. We've still got some more questions there that we're not going to be able to get to. I think that seems to be par for the course on this conference. We're not getting to everyone's questions, but really appreciate your insight, and I hope everyone was able to just see how an organisation that was in the thick of it throughout COVID was really able to use data and the insights out of data to its absolute advantage, and really be able to serve the community and serve its customers. So thank you so much for that, Lisa. And I think we're heading into a break now. So thank you, everybody.
In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organisations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organisations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts, along with early access to analytics talent who speak the language of business, technology, and mathematics to drive value and navigate change. Through the power of analytics, we are empowering organisations to put their future into their hands.
At SAS, we love bold questions, outrageous and impossible questions. The answers are waiting to be discovered, because space isn't the new frontier. Data is. And with the right questions and the right analytics, we make data do amazing things, like make the world safer, healthier and kinder. All we have to do is ask the data, analyze it, shape it, and make it work smarter for everyone, everywhere. With SAS, you can turn data into answers and ask the questions that move the world forward. SAS, curiosity forever.
AI in the enterprise is all the rage. But put the hype aside. How are today's organizations actually executing and seeing value from enterprise AI? Dataiku is the platform, democratizing access to data and enabling companies to build their own path to enterprise AI. To make enterprise AI a reality, Dataiku provides one simple user interface for data preparation, data exploration, automated machine learning, model deployment, AI monitoring, and management. Dataiku is built for everyone with robust features for both the code-free and the code-first. From business users and analysts to data scientists and engineers, Dataiku makes working with data faster and smarter. Each company's path to enterprise AI looks different, so Dataiku supports the creation of a spectrum of applications. Whether that means building out a self-serve analytics platform or fully operationalized AI integrated with business processes. No matter what the underlying changes in architecture or advancements in technology, Dataiku remains at the center, the cornerstone of data governance and responsible AI. Dataiku's centralized, controlled, and elastic environment fuels exponential growth in the amount of data, the number of AI projects, and the number of people contributing to such projects. Dataiku, for every industry, every use case, and also for everyone. Discover your path to enterprise AI at dataiku.com.
People have got a unique thing about them, which is not only are they awesome technically, but they feel a sense of belonging. We genuinely call ourselves a family. Genic was started out of a desire to start something from scratch that tried to tackle the data market with a new and fresh approach.
Our vision is to never settle on the technology, to be constantly chasing the unicorn.
The space is moving really quickly, and we see it as our job to be aware of new things coming, and when they are good things, be able to introduce them to our clients.
Databricks is the data and AI company. We help data teams solve the world's toughest problems. They can't be solved in silos. They can't be solved by one person. We need all the data, all the science, all the brain power in one place on the only open, unified platform for data management, business analytics, and machine learning.
In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organizations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organizations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts, along with early access to analytics talent who speak the language of business, technology, and mathematics to drive value and navigate change. Through the power of analytics, we are empowering organizations to put their future into their hands.
At SAS, we love bold questions, outrageous and impossible questions. The answers are waiting to be discovered because space isn't the new frontier. Data is. And with the right questions and the right analytics, we make data do amazing things. Like make the world safer, faster, healthier, and kinder. All we have to do is ask the data, analyze it, shape it, and make it work smarter for everyone, everywhere. With SAS, you can turn data into answers and ask the questions that move the world forward. SAS, curiosity forever.
AI in the enterprise is all the rage. But put the hype aside. How are today's organizations actually executing and seeing value from enterprise AI? Dataiku is the platform, democratizing access to data and enabling companies to build their own path to enterprise AI. To make enterprise AI a reality, Dataiku provides one simple user interface for data preparation, data exploration, automated machine learning, model deployment, AI monitoring, and management. Dataiku is built for everyone with robust features for both the code-free and the code-first. From business users and analysts to data scientists and engineers, Dataiku makes working with data faster and smarter. Each company's path to enterprise AI looks different, so Dataiku supports the creation of a spectrum of applications. Whether that means building out a self-serve analytics platform or fully operationalized AI integrated with business processes. No matter what the underlying changes in architecture or advancements in technology, Dataiku remains at the center, the cornerstone of data governance and responsible AI. Dataiku centralized, controlled, and elastic environment fuels exponential growth in the amount of data, the number of AI projects, and the number of people contributing to such projects. Dataiku, for every industry, every use case, and also for everyone.
Discover your path to enterprise AI at dataiku.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Delighted to be here speaking with you. Now, I don't get any introduction at all, which is okay. I'm comfortable with that. Perhaps I don't need any introduction, or I've been here many times before. So I'm thrilled to be presenting some research that is actually ongoing. So unlike Raghu's work this morning, which was completed research, our research is still ongoing. So we'd love to hear the questions you have and any feedback that you have along the way. So I'm going to be talking about online word of mouth. Lisa actually ended her talk by essentially saying how important word of mouth is to calls. And so I'm going to be, in fact, following up on that front with you folks. And this is work that I've done with my colleagues in New York, Mahima, Andrea, and Karthik. And they're, of course, not here right now, but delighted to be presenting the work that I'm doing with them. So the first thing I'd like to, first question I'd like to put out there for you is, are seeded marketing campaigns effective? And of course, you're sort of asking me, some of you are sort of wondering, what are these seeded marketing campaigns? Well, seeded marketing campaigns are essentially campaigns in which you're trying to seed word of mouth, because as you know, word of mouth is actually particularly effective. But, companies try to seed word of mouth as well, sometimes with influencers, sometimes with ordinary customers, and they're just trying to seed those campaigns so that the word of mouth starts getting pushed out. Now, the question really is, are these seeded marketing campaigns effective? And the answer is, actually, they are very effective. There was research published in 2019, really good piece of research in the Journal of Marketing that showed seeded marketing campaigns are indeed very effective. They have elasticities that are very similar to the elasticities that you see, for example, with television advertising. But the most important thing there is that seeded marketing campaigns are not only effective, but they're also incredibly efficient because seeded marketing campaigns cost a fraction of what TV campaigns might cost. In fact, a seeded marketing campaign would cost, say, for example, about $150,000, $160,000, as opposed to, as you know very well, television campaigns cost a multifold of that number. So they are, in fact, very effective and efficient. But of course, all of us subscribe to the view in this cartoon that I'm going to put up, which is the boss saying, I support word of mouth marketing just as long as we can tightly control exactly what they say. They here is, of course, customers. And so this whole view that a lot of marketers have is that, well, how do we actually control what they say, what customers will say about us? And so the question really that we try to answer in this work is, what do they actually say? That's what we are trying to find out in this piece of research. What do they say? Is it actually all random, or is it actually very systematic? And that's what we are trying to address in this piece of work. So just an example here of what a customer might say. This is a customer, Jenny Mack, who is talking about a car here. And let me just read it out. It is very quick and nippy. It handles well. The suspension is comfortable but not too soft. It can be thrown around corners, but hitting potholes in it isn't too painful. I don't think I've had as much fun driving a car before. I've had it for nearly a year, and I really do enjoy driving it. So if you look at this review that Jenny put up, you sort of say, okay, well, what are you trying to get at, Ujjwal? Well, what I'm trying to get at is that, in fact, this review has some very systematic aspects about it. So this review talks about it's fun to drive, the car is fun to drive, it's good around corners, and it's got a very comfortable suspension. What it actually doesn't talk about is equally interesting. It doesn't talk about its looks at all. It doesn't talk about how it makes her feel in terms of status or prestige sitting in the car. She just wanted to talk about fun to drive, good around corners, comfortable suspension. And there is something very systematic about this that gets repeated again and again and again in online word of mouth. So this division between the top end, which is the words in white, and the bottom end, which is the words in red, is actually very systematic. And that's what I'm going to take you through. And in fact, I'm also going to point out why that is the case. That's what our work is all about. So in this particular project, we've got two different data sources that we've used, and they actually go back a little while in terms of time. The first one is from Boora, which used to be a site in the United States. In fact, it was founded in San Francisco, and there were hundreds and thousands of restaurants that were rated on this website by customers. So the Boora is really the boos are criticisms, and the Ras are positive things about the restaurants that people had gone to. And then the second piece of data that we're going to use is TripAdvisor. I'm not actually going to show you all the technical details, but obviously we use natural language processing, text mining, to be able to understand what the patterns were in terms of what people were talking about. Now, with the Boora data, fortunately, they had actually done a lot of semantic tagging, and that allowed us to use the data directly. And then, of course, we were able to do our own work as well on the data. So what I'm going to show you first is the results from the data from Boora, and then the second part would be the results from TripAdvisor, where actually we've been able to do further analysis that we couldn't do with Boora, and I'll talk about what that further analysis is in due time. So the first piece of data, of course, I told you already what Boora was. Boora was a website which had a lot of ratings of customers. And I'm just going to try to get to the next slide here. Yep, there we go. So the data looks somewhat like this. I don't know about you, but I see a very systematic pattern here. So look at just the top graph. It's categorized the reviews into three different categories: food, service, and ambience. And those three different categories are what are listed there. It's the average per review that people talk about food, that people talk about service, and that people talk about ambience. And that's what you see in the top graph, and it's all about the positive stuff that people talk about. The bottom stuff is much more negative. What you see there visually is a very systematic pattern. And the systematic pattern is that people talk about food a lot more than they talk about service and a lot more than they talk about ambience. In fact, that pattern replicates in the criticisms, but not as much as it's shown up in the positive things that people talk about. So there's a very systematic pattern there that people talk about the food much more than the service and much more than the ambience of the restaurant. Now let's look at a second piece of data, which is TripAdvisor data. So as you all know, TripAdvisor data is just data about hotels and destinations and restaurants. But what we're going to focus here on is hotel reviews that customers have put up. And so, there's thousands of hotels, and we've got hundreds and thousands of reviews that we are looking at here in this analysis. So what we found through some extensive analysis was that people were much more likely to talk about the following topics. So we actually had 19 different topics that we'd categorized the data into that people talk about, and I'm just highlighting some of them here. The topics that people talk about most frequently are service, room pleasantness, cleanliness, for example. So just to give you a sense of how much people talk about service, 1 in every 2 reviews on average talks about service. So about 52% of all reviews have some component of service that people have in fact talked about. So it's quite significant. They talk about room pleasantness, they talk about the hotel cleanliness, and that's a very systematic, obviously, finding that we have across these hundreds and thousands of reviews. Now, what's actually very interesting is what they don't talk about so much. What they don't talk about very much is things like transit services. Is there actually a bus that takes them from the airport to the hotel? What are the sorts of business amenities that are offered by the hotel? And interestingly enough, they don't talk about price very much either. So about 8% of reviews talk about price. Now, the first thing you might have said was, look, clearly service is very important and transit services perhaps not as important. So that's why people talk about service and not so much about transit services. But price is there's a reason why I put up price there. Price is not number 3, by the way, in the topics not talked about. But only 8% of reviews have have a mention of price or value. And obviously, price and value is not an unimportant variable for customers. So it's not necessarily the importance of the attributes that's explaining the difference between the topics that people talk about and the topics that people don't talk about. There's something else systematic that's going on there. Now, interestingly enough, these topics that people talk about, they could be driven by just customers' views of what would be most helpful to other customers. Now, what you see, interestingly enough, in this graph is that on the x-axis, I've got the topic presence proportion in reviews, and you can see way at the right-hand corner is service. And on the y-axis, on the vertical axis, I've got the average number of helpfuls that have come through for those reviews that include these topics. And what you can see there very clearly is an incredibly systematic pattern. So for example, service, room pleasantness, cleanliness are on the right-hand side, and people also find those reviews to be very helpful. On the left-hand side, you see price, business amenities, and transit services, and people don't necessarily find those reviews particularly helpful in reading those reviews. And how do we get the data on average number of helpfuls? Well, TripAdvisor actually has a function where people can say whether it's helpful or not, and that's what we analyzed through this process. Interestingly enough, this I'm just presenting some averages here. but we also have estimated some models, and you can imagine, for those who are technically inclined, you can imagine that most reviews actually have 0 helpfuls attached to them. So most reviews are not viewed as helpful, but that's just people not taking the time to click on helpful. So using some modeling techniques, essentially called zero-inflated modeling techniques for count models, we then also try to understand which of these attributes is really driving helpfulness, and the pattern remains very similar. The attributes that are in green here are much more impactful on the helpfulness of the review, and the topics that are in red here are much less helpful in terms of helpfulness. In fact, I had a personal experience just a few months ago when I went and stayed at a hotel in Gippsland, and it was a gorgeous, historic hotel, heritage place, and we were on the ground floor of the hotel, and unfortunately and sadly, there were a bunch of people who were night owls, and so they kept us up until 1:30, and I wrote a review, which I don't usually do, but I wrote a review of this hotel, informing others that, look, be very careful when you stay at this hotel. Make sure you don't stay in a ground floor room. That will keep you up perhaps all night long. So you've got to be very careful of that. And interestingly enough, and of course I was very pleased to see the number of helpfuls, comments, not comments, but the number of helpful upticks that I got on that particular review that I wrote. And so there's something very systematic about what I told them about. I didn't tell them about the price or the business amenities or anything of that sort. And I'll tell you what distinguishes these two aspects in just a few minutes. So, the conclusion from all of this is that word of mouth, in the online space, of course, in the offline space, there's no reason why it would be any different. But what you give to people is what they find helpful. And so the question really is, what do they actually find helpful? Can we dig a little bit deeper as to what they find helpful and what they don't find helpful? And what is that systematic aspect of reviews that people find helpful? And what topics do they find helpful? What topics do they not find helpful? And that's what we wanted to study next. And interestingly enough, going back to the Bura example, what you find very quickly, if you just think about it a little bit, is that food, for example, is not observable before purchase. So obviously, potential customers find any mention of food to be much more helpful than, for example, ambience, which they could potentially see from the outside. Now, it's not fully observable, obviously. You see photos, etc., etc., but photos of food are not as informative as photos of ambience are. So clearly, what distinguishes these attributes is that some attributes are not observable pre-purchase, and some attributes are in fact more observable pre-purchase. And let's have a look at what happens with the TripAdvisor data. If you look at the topics that people talked about, they are in fact topics that are not observable before purchase. Service, room pleasantness. You actually have to be in the room to find out if it's pleasant or not. Cleanliness, you could potentially walk into a hotel, but most of us are actually booking hotels in locations where we aren't already there. So we are actually depending on other customers to tell us about such attributes. On the flip side, the topics that people didn't talk about very much, and in fact only 1% or something, 1.5% of people talked about transit services and business amenities, and about 8% talked about price, are in fact relatively observable. The hotel will have a lot of information about whether there are transit services available to the airport or not. They will tell you what business amenities are available. They will tell you about price. Obviously, you know about price. So those are topics that are not talked about, and in fact are incredibly observable. Let's look at the whole gamut of 19 topics that I was talking about earlier. And what you see here is something incredibly systematic. So we separately try to understand from customers which of these attributes are more, or topics are much more observable and which are not. And turns out you see this incredibly systematic pattern in front of you, where the more observable the attribute is, the less helpful people find the reviews that contain information about those topics. On the flip side, people find reviews to be very helpful if, in fact, people talk about attributes of topics that are not observable prior to purchase. So, in fact, there is something very systematic going on. Observability appears to be the explanation. We then did a whole bunch of experiments as well, which were very carefully controlled. And what we found there was exactly what I've been talking about, which is that potential customers prefer information on topics that cannot be observed pre-purchase. And indeed, customers prefer to give information on topics that would be useful to potential customers. So there is, in fact, a beautiful Nash equilibrium going on here in this online word-of-mouth system that we have. And so it is not as random as we think. It is actually particularly systematic. So there is observability that then drives helpfulness, and that drives the content of word-of-mouth, and it is very, very systematic. So that which is effective, which is word-of-mouth, is in fact also very systematic. And we're just in the process of doing some other work that preliminary indications are that, in fact, it can also be very effective if the seed is on topics that are more helpful or more observable to other customers. So with that, I think I have come to the end of my time in terms of presentation, and I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. So delighted to get any questions from you folks. And in fact, my colleague Anita is going to be moderating the Q&A session. So Anita, welcome.
Thank you, Ujjwal. I'm so looking forward to being able to travel again and actually look through some of those reviews, and I certainly have taken advantage of that. So that was really useful to know what goes behind it, you know, that big black box that we talked about yesterday as well. So you talked in your session specifically around seeded marketing campaigns being effective. Sanan spoke yesterday around fake news traveling faster than, you know, the truth. So how will consumers know ultimately what's a real review and which is fake?
That's a really good question, Anita, and you know, to the audience. There's actually been quite a bit of work done in computer science and in marketing on trying to detect whether a review is fake or not. And so, in fact, you know, one of the things that allows you to detect whether a review is fake is the extremities in the review. But there's a lot of other aspects as well in these reviews when people start, you know, going gaga about a product or service, and it's all in a positive tone. You know, there is a higher likelihood. I'm not going to say that it's always fake, but there's a much higher likelihood of it being fake. Now, the good thing about our data set is that the data actually comes from a time when there wasn't as much fake news. So we do have a little bit of control on that aspect. But regardless of that part, you know, the interesting thing is that if you know, if there are these fake reviews, you know, you're not going to find them particularly helpful if they're not talking about the topics that matter to you. So eventually, that still is a pretty critical element. But you know, fake reviews, of course, you know, are part of our life these days. You know, as much as there are some estimates that 30% of all reviews are indeed fake. But who else do you turn to in terms of trying to understand more about the product or service that you would like to buy into?
That's great as well. So, you know, going back again to what Sanan mentioned yesterday, I did read in his book something very interesting around reviews. So, for example, if I show up to a hotel and I was going to rate it very, very highly, and I see a review that's given it a negative review that's displayed, someone else said this hotel gets a negative review. What I learned from that book is that won't actually convince me to downgrade my originally intended 5-star review. But if I was originally going to put a 4-star review, it'll actually push me to go up to 5 stars to outweigh that negative review that TripAdvisor would have shown me. What are your thoughts in terms of this kind of bias that naturally seeded into these platforms?
Well, I think that's a great question, and of course the finding that Sanan has is a very good one. It's actually been replicated quite a few times. This sort of dynamic aspect of online reviews is unquestionably one of the most pervasive aspects. Yes, it does create biases, but at the end of the day, it's also a question of us looking at, what do we actually look at? Do we look at these individual reviews as much in terms of the numbers that people give, or do we look at the overall number? And from our perspective, do we look at the overall number and then evaluate it in an absolute sense, or do we evaluate it in a relative sense? My best guess is that people are looking at things in a relative sense. So they're looking at a 4.8 versus a 4.5 hotel. And in that case, as long as you assume that a lot of these dynamic effects are occurring in a relatively random way, which is that people seeing negative reviews and then becoming a little bit more positive if they were positively inclined, and the other way around, then it shouldn't really affect the relative rank ordering of these hotels. What we do look at is the words that people use in these reviews. There's no question that that actually does happen. And so that doesn't go away just because there is a bias in terms of the numbers we offer. Now, if the words are also getting biased in some form, and they could, then of course it's something to be somewhat concerned about. But from a consumer perspective, they're still trying to gather information about these hotels, and they're trying to get some signals. And so they would still be looking at these things in a relative sense. So while it's an incredibly interesting phenomenon, and it's also interesting that most reviews in fact are positive. There is a positivity bias that is inherent in online word of mouth. So those are interesting facts. I'm not so sure they're going to dramatically alter the way in which people use that information, but that's just an opinion that I'm expressing. This is not necessarily fully data-based.
I have, we're coming up close to time. We'll have time for one or two more questions. As a follow-up to that, Sean, again, from the NAB, has asked a question regarding the percentage of people, like what's the propensity to post something negative, if you experienced it, and what's the propensity to post something positive if you've experienced? Do you have any stats behind that?
Yeah, so I think it's for the lack of something, well, actually, I'll tell you how I think about these reviews and these ratings and things like that. For those of you who are familiar with Douglas Adams, the magic number is 42. So in the world of service and satisfaction and reviews, usually have a 5-point scale. The magic number there is 4.2. And that already gives you the answer, which is people are much more likely to be talking about positive experiences than about negative experiences. In many instances, people actually don't want to talk about negative experiences because it's almost like they have to revisit the negative experience they had by talking about it. And that revisiting process is not something that most customers want to do, and so they just don't follow through and give negative remarks. And look, I think you and I, Sean, and everybody else have had enough negative experiences in this world dealing with a range of different service providers. But we don't tend to go out and actually give as many negative reviews. So there's a propensity to do a lot more positive stuff, which is why you get this average of 4.2 in my view. In fact, it's quite close to 4.2 in a range of studies that I've actually been involved in. I'm quite surprised at how many times it just comes out around that number. So to me, somebody getting a 4.1 is not a big deal because you're actually below what would be, generally speaking, the average.
Thank you very much. So this is the last question for Ujjwal. We do have yet many more coming in, so we appreciate those. So in the presentation, this is from Melissa Wu, helpfulness is an important factor to drive word of mouth. So from your experience, what other factors drive word of mouth besides helpfulness?
So certainly, I mean, there are lots of different factors that drive word of mouth. One, of course, is, as I mentioned, is how helpful the review might be to other customers. But of course, the overall experience that people have will also drive whether they provide word of mouth or not. And in fact, studies have shown that there are, in fact, a lot of different individual level factors that can explain why people provide reviews and why people do word of mouth. People are different, and I'm quite astonished sometimes when I go on these websites and people are given like 15,000, 15 reviews, 100 reviews of things, but those are just different people. So there's a lot of individual level factors that drive word of mouth. And of course, there's been a lot of studies on viral marketing, and so there's a lot of explanations for what kinds of things people are more likely to push out to other customers. And of course, Sinan talked about a lot of the fake stuff that happens. Well, the fake stuff moves around a lot because there is, in fact, very provocative material in it, right? That's why it moves around a lot. So there is, in fact, some systematic evidence on that. I'm very happy to share some of those papers with you, or citations to those papers with Melissa if she wants to know more about that. And of course, to the others that I haven't answered questions from today, please don't hesitate to link in with me on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to answer your questions individually. Would be delighted to do that. So thank you very much for the time that you have given me and the questions as well.
Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us today and having your own session. I'm really hoping we'll get back to travel very, very soon, looking at those TripAdvisor reviews. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So 2020 was truly a contactless year to curb the spread of the pandemic. Many consumers had no choice but to make purchases online and await a delayed delivery or use a click and collect model. Our next talk is on establishing customer intimacy in this contactless world. Our next speaker, Vincent Osabel, is a Senior Solutions Engineer from Data IQ in Melbourne. He has over 20 years of experience in data and analytics, supporting large organizations realize the data science vision and roadmap through defining AI solutions, implementing data science projects, and conducting training and enablement for customers and prospects. Having worked predominantly in the financial services sector, both in ANZ and Southeast Asia, Vincent has accumulated a wealth of experience across regulatory compliance, credit risk management, and customer analytics during her careers at SAS, Business Minds, and Deloitte. She is also an advocate of women pursuing careers in data science and has been a trainer and judge for a datathon sponsored by Tech Women New Zealand late last year. Over to you, Vincent, for your session.
Thanks, Anita. Welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to actually present to you today about a topic that I think all of us have been affected with. I mean, all of us are consumers of a product or a service wherever we are. We were during last year's pandemic. So yeah, I think this is just something that to shed some light on what is our perspective with respect to this situation that we were in. So Anita already given us a good, very good introduction of who I am. So I won't be repeating that, but suffice to say that in the next 25 minutes, what I intend to do is to share a perspective on how customer intimacy can be, you can retain it, establish it, and sustain it, despite not having a direct contact with your customers per se, just because of all that has happened recently. So how do I plan to do this? So I'll start first with a brief introduction of who Data IQ is, who we are, what we do, and who are our customers here in Australia and Asia Pacific, as well as globally. I will then move on to relating to you the 2021 AI trends that we see that will highly impact customer intelligence, before I follow this on with a look back on how customer interactions have evolved as the way that we engage our customers move from a commoditized way of looking at our products and services to a more personalized one. And I follow this on with how you can actually embrace AI in the different touch points that you have with your customers. I'll then bring these concepts to life by citing a case study of one of our top customers in the US who has scaled their AI capabilities across the various customer touch points that they have before I wrap it up with some key takeaways for you to think about. So Dataiku, we are one of the fastest growing data science and software providers in the industry. Our success as a company and our effectiveness as a technology is brought about by, has been regarded highly by leading analysts. So this year we are very privileged to have been recognized once more by Gartner as a leader in the data science and machine learning Magic Quadrant. And we've been on this quadrant for 2 years in a row. And this is an achievement for us because of the history of our organization. We've only been in the business for about 8 years, but we have a global presence that spans across the top 500 Fortune 500 companies in virtually every major industry. So it's from pharmaceuticals to manufacturing to financial services and beyond. We are utilized by thousands of enthusiastic users across various personas within the analytics life cycle, whether you're a data scientist, whether you are a data engineer, or a citizen data scientist, you're able to use our platform to drive better economy of insights and delivering net new AI capabilities in turn. We also work with an extensive partner network spanning across technology providers, cloud vendors, and global services organizations that you can see on the screen. And we are over 500 employees. So as I mentioned, we've only been in business for 8 years, but globally we are more than 500 people strong, men and women working in the field of data science. And in Asia Pacific, we have about 40 people located across all over Asia, primarily in Australia and in Singapore, wherein we have the offices. While we've only been operating in Asia Pacific for 2.5 years, I'm proud to say that we've actually established a strong foothold in key customers, especially in the financial services industry. So we have Standard Chartered Bank in Singapore and Westpac here in Australia, who is widely using us in various use cases across data pipelining, building analytical workflows, and analytics altogether, leveraging open source as the main key ingredient of that strategy. So if there's one thing I can take away from 2020 as like a silver lining, despite of what has happened, it is really the acceleration of AI adoption across our customers. So what you see on your screen are the key headlines that you need to, that are things for you to think about as you move forward with your AI transformation journey. So as I have limited time today, I will be touching on briefly the key points that are unmarked, but I'll be doing a deep dive on those that I've marked, because I think these are the things that highly impact customer intelligence or customer analytics in general. So with respect to agility, we've seen that the increased demand for nimbleness of our AI systems and AI outputs will continue to be an expectation from our customers. And the reason for that is whenever there is an unforeseen event, such as snap lockdowns or border closures or any other black swan events similar to what we've experienced last year, our customers expect us to know that you still know that, am I highly likely to churn? Am I still a viable customer for you? Will I be committing fraud, or am I still a viable cross-sell prospect, given that maybe I've lost my job? So our customers expect us to be nimble, or our models to be nimble and agile in that way. Otherwise, everything just falls apart, because they say, how are you marketing something to me when you already know, and you should know, that I am not ready to actually partake in this journey with you because of personal circumstances that have happened to me. So that's on the agility side. Now, on the responsible AI side, we see a shift of its importance. 2020 was the year of preparation of a lot of organizations doing research around this area, establishing the frameworks necessary to actually implement initiatives around this. But where the rubber hits the road is this year. A lot of organizations now are thinking of putting all of the research into practice and making sure that the organization embrace all the initiatives, all the efforts that go into it. So it's not to say that 2021 everything will be in place, but it's a start of organizations starting to get more serious about the topic of using AI responsibly across the organization. And just to quote a tech ethicist and the founder of All AI, All Tech is Human, he's saying that the growing influence of AI on our daily lives is, and society at large, necessitates a more thoughtful approach with its development and deployment. And I think that's very true today, wherein AI is pervasive across everything that we do, and of course, in all the customer touch points that we do with whenever we interact with our respective customers. Now, in respect to cloud, so on the technology side of things, we see more organizations embracing cloud computing. And this is not surprising given what has happened last year, wherein we've seen our customers globally struggle to actually provision the right resources, the right amount of resources as we move into the new ways of working remotely, and just all the assets that we used to run on bespoke laptops and individual desktops. It's not going to work if we are all running on an on-premise architecture. So with that, we've observed that the acceleration of adoption to cloud within our customer base has just grown exponentially. And this is a trend that we will see that will continue to happen in 2021 and beyond. And this is why it's not surprising that in a report released by Gartner in May 2020, they expect that by next year, the use of public cloud services will contribute to 90% of data and analytics innovation. And this is something we're seeing now. We're starting the year now, and yeah, in our conversations with our clients, it remains true. And last but not the least is about self-service analytics. So we've witnessed a gradual transition of our customer base from to a more self-service model of acquiring actually and also accessing data for the purpose of analytics. And it was not until last year that, so in Data ICO, we've been evangelizing organizations since I think 5 years ago about self-service analytics. But it wasn't only until last year that organizations have actually started to put in place or fully understand what it means to have a self-service model with respect to these capabilities. So we're seeing a wave of change as companies do not want to limit the use of AI within a small group of people or within the data science teams, for example. And this is driven by two key factors. The first of which is that the limited AI talent that's available internally and externally is driving this change, as well as the push for democratization of data and ML assets. So these things are key because there is an expectation for AI initiatives to actually deliver the promised or the expected business value, as well as scale it out further into the organization. Instead of you building one use case or just a couple of use cases, they expect AI to be more pervasive across all the customer touch points that you will have. Now, moving on to MLOps and AI governance, 2020, the global health crisis that we've just experienced has paved the way for organizations to start thinking about drift monitoring. So they've seen a massive impact on how the models have performed just because of the changes in the behavior or the way that customers are interacting with different organizations, such as the push for contactless payments, more so than cash. Online shopping has changed customer behavior, and drift has been pervasive. Data and model drifts has been all over the place. And this is the reason why the push for having an MLOps framework in order to monitor all of these things and to iterate quickly and easily update the model results is very important. So we've seen organizations now trying, as part of the MLOps framework, they're actually looking into making sure they answer questions such as, is the business needs related to the models that I've built changed as a result of unforeseen circumstances, or the level of granularity of how I've generated this model still relevant? So for example, forecast for time horizons. Do I need to actually forecast it in more compressed timeframes, like more granular timeframes, as opposed to what I've done pre-COVID? And of course, in the event of situations that a lot of volatility, a lot of changes, do I need to actually put in some human intervention rather than automate everything? So these are things that form part of the MLOps question. But as you can see in your screen, MLOps is just one part of the full AI governance requirement, because AI governance includes ethics and responsibility, which is all around explainability, privacy, all the way down to AI analytics and project management. So you see, there's a lot of moving parts to make AI governance a reality, but it is a mandatory requirement as you move from making AI-based decisions on all your customer engagements and interactions. And this also necessitates, this also becomes now a necessity rather than just, I want something in place. Just because, again, this AI governance allows us to actually promote more democratized way of doing data and ML and building responsible AI products as a whole. So the next trend that I'm going to unpack is all about collaboration and inclusivity. So when it comes to development and operationalizing AI assets, we've seen democratization as a way to actually lend itself more closely to the ethics and responsibility aspect of the AI governance lens. So data science is not the sole responsibility of data scientists. It is a collaborative and inclusive process with various personas involved across different stages of the analytical life cycle. It is continuous across model experimentation and deployment, and it has to be something that's scalable and can be replicated, as the intent is to actually do this not only in tens, not only in hundreds, but in thousands of models. And we've seen this in a lot of our clients who has, and I'll share who that client is, wherein AI is very pervasive in the way that they interact or engage their customers. So just to cite an example, GE Aviation, which is one of our biggest clients out of the USA, had also difficulty scaling their data efforts due to a myriad of reasons. So silo data, which I think you can relate, a lot of our customers have the same problems or same challenges. So silo data, no central repository of analytical assets that they built. There's no project reuse, which leads to time loss, as well as no central vision of what the data is really going to be used for. So what they've done is they've built what they call as the digital league, which is essentially a cross-functional team of leaders from various lines of businesses such as supply chain, finance, IT, and engineering to firm up a central vision and a central repository of all assets that can be used by different teams within GE Aviation. And this has created tremendous benefits for them in the way that they actually build, operationalize, and of course act on AI outcomes that they've delivered. And last but not the least is about embedding AI rather than it being an add-on. So organizations who are way past the experimentation stage expect the business impact out of AI to be widespread. So in this case, if we think about the customer life cycle, they expect the AI insights and outcomes to influence origination, customer development and value management, all the way to win back. And these, what you see on your screen are just some of the key AI insights and outcomes that are pertinent to actually supporting all of your customer engagements. And with this, AI becomes an integral part of the decision-making process. So I think that's key when we say that now AI is embedded. Because as a customer moves along from being a prospect to being a customer, to becoming a new customer, to becoming an existing customer, all the way back to for them canceling a service with you, you need to have a way to actually manage all of these customer engagements with, especially in the face of you're not actually talking to the customer anymore. It's more of what they do rather than what they say. So now that we understand, or you have now an idea of where AI will take you from here on out, I think it's also good to look back as to how this has come about. Like, where are all these, how the progression of or the changes within customer activity and engagement has come about. So a good way, when I was preparing for this talk, I saw this paper written by Joseph Pines with James H. Gilmore. So if you don't know Joseph Pines, he is actually an international acclaimed speaker and author and a management advisor to the top 500 companies on mainly around the marketing side of doing business or customer engagement interaction. So he's written a lot of books and he's actually created a TED Talk. If all of us who has been in this space for quite some time, we all know the term, the experience economy, and he co-authored that term with James H. Gilmore. So in the article that came out in the Harvard Business Review back in 1998, he talked about the progression of economic value, which you see on your screen at the moment. So what he's saying here that, so just to summarize what he said is about the economic value of goods and services have changed as the world has evolved from an agrarian economy all the way to the digital economy. So the way that he illustrated it is, think of yourself, or think of the analogy that he used to actually explain this is the analogy of a birthday cake. So in the agrarian economy, we build everything from scratch using the ingredients coming from the earth. So it's mixing flour, butter, and sugar, and eggs to make a birthday cake. So you only spend a couple of cents for you to make the birthday cake. But now, as the goods-based industrial economy advanced, moms or dads making the birthday cake now wants to pay $1 or $2 for a pre-mixed baking package, such as those offered by Betty Crocker, for example. And then as you progress to the service economy, wherein more people become more busy, they don't actually have time to make something from scratch, they now buy something that's pre-made from a bakery or grocery store and spend about $10 to $15, which costs 10 times or more, as opposed to just using the pre-mixed way of baking a cake. And of course, now in the digital economy, it's not about a cake. It's about providing, they spend more money to outsource all of these processes so that they can actually bring forth an experience. So it's more of outsourcing it to a business company to stage a birthday party. And the cake is just free. It's not actually the center of the service that you want to acquire from them. And of course, you can see there the business imperative and consumer sensibility as well. That's what Joseph Pines talked about, has changed as well, from supplying all the way now to rendering. So if we map this progression across pricing and competitive position, again, it is not all about the cake, and it is clear that it is only when goods and services we offer are rendered as experiences is when they become authentic. And in order for these experiences to be authentic, they need to be personalized. And personalization is therefore the key to establishing and maintaining customer intimacy. So it's really good that even if this article came out 20 years ago, it's still very much true today. The message of staging experiences as the next competitive advantage for leading organizations or companies, or those that are aspiring to be one. So it's still very much true. What we can, if we try to overlay this with our customer management approach, we can see that in order to maximize marketing ROI or customer value, we need to recognize that some approaches will work well than others, depending where you are in the progression of this life cycle or this value chain. If you see the relationship of your customers, your relationship with your customers as more of a means to market only as solely a product, then doing the list pool might be sufficient for you. But what we see here is that if we want to actually maximize, but it does entail a higher degree of marketing sophistication, the way to go is you actually aspire to render authentic customer experiences through real-time offers and conversations. So intimacy, as we all know, entails a trusted and personal relationship. Otherwise, it is just a transaction. So one good example that we see or that we've heard, so Booking.com, I think all of us know who Booking.com is. And the way that we see it is Booking.com has given us, the way that they've explained it is that they are a company that has AI pervasive across the entire organization. So as you can see here, Booking.com is empty without AI, but if you put overlay AI, it's pervasive across how they actually try to engage their customer base. So you can see here that everything here is personalized based on what you need to find. And that's what we aim to find, or that's what we aim to get to when we get into this stage of rendering authentic customer experiences. So how can AI help render authentic customer experiences? Well, we can summarize it into like an acronym or the 3 I's. It's inciting, interact, and improve, which is what you see on the right-hand side. So exciting entails deepening the customer insight that you have with your customers to harness data and build better profiles for your customers. So it's to make sure that with improved data architectures, we are able to harvest and store a greater diversity of data to provide insights into your customer's preference. So previously, it's all about structured data that you have in your CRM systems or the transactions, but now you need to actually overlay unstructured data coming from the social media profiles that they follow to make sure that it's a more rich and a complete understanding of your customer's preference. And of course, you can still leverage all the other good things that come with deepening your customer insights, such as, still building cyclical customer view, doing value-based segments. But within the predictive modeling space as well, it's come to our attention that, there's a lot of new developments around churn modeling, wherein apart from knowing who's actually going to leave you or not take up your services anymore, you can take it up to the next level by actually predicting who will actually respond positively to our marketing messaging, which is also known as uplift modeling. So the more data that you have, the way that if you can actually harness that and make it more usable for your purpose, then that's going to be key for you to push on, you'll be able to actually deepen your customer insight. The next I is all about interaction. So if you're able to orchestrate and optimize your customer interactions, leveraging the insights that you've already derived from the previous stage, then you're well equipped to actually maximize what AI can do for you. So what you see here is an example of how we can take in or real-time information, for example, digital IDs coming from your mobile banking or internet banking services, and merging that or putting that in place with other systems as well, so that you can actually we'll be able to improve on the different things that you'll be that you aim to do within your organization. And then the last piece is about improvement. So improvement entails having a way to actually take in the feedback that you have within your platforms so that you can actually continuously improve. So what you have to see here is it's a cycle. So what you need to understand is that the 3 I's is really a cycle for you to be able to do all of these things cohesively and more effectively. And just quickly, I know that we're actually prompting for Q&A now, is the challenges and pitfalls of all of these things relies on having a robust way of doing AI or doing AI responsibly. So we've seen these are just some of the key examples of how AI has gone rogue. And the way that we actually can address this is about being human centric and being process oriented, which are the core pillars of building responsible AI systems. And apart from that, we can actually scale as well AI capabilities across organizations. So this is where we've seen how AI has been important to democratize, so that our AI, again, this ties back to responsible AI, that if you open it up to more people, then the bias will be less, and you can have a more explainable way of assessing what are things that you haven't accounted for before, instead of you just considering data science as all math.
Sorry, Vincent.
So, yeah, I know.
We're already at time. And, we actually have a few questions for you, and we've run out of time.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Sneaking one question, because I'm mindful that people might need a break. So, of course, Ujjwal had talked about TripAdvisor, and funnily enough, you're talking about Booking.com. So, in terms of your talk, this is the most valuable piece, I think, as marketers, to move from commodities to experiences. What industries have done better moving along this progression of economic value?
All right. It's a very good question. So what we've seen in our interactions with a lot of customers worldwide is that organizations that are digital natives are the ones that lend themselves better into progressing into the highest level of economic value. So what we mean by that is Booking.com, as an example, or even TripAdvisor, they started their business as a digital business, i.e. they have the background. So people who usually in the digital business already have a landscape or an understanding of how to actually mine data out of the internet, like online sites or online platforms. So they actually can navigate around crafting those personalized messages better. So I think that's the reason why I think all of us understand that even the traditional players now, the incumbents, so like the big banks or the manufacturing industries or the retail industry, as they move towards a more online-based business, or when they say they have a digital transformation initiative, that's their way of actually trying to play catch up with organizations that are already digital in nature. So it's not just one industry, it's anyone who's actually putting forward the efforts to become more digital. They're the ones who's actually going to be more well-placed to advance towards the staging experiences within that economic framework.
Thanks, Vincent. That's, I think every organization has moved to digital, especially in 2020.
I know.
Of a talk, you've covered lots, including sort of AI governance, customer experience, the customer journey, and the collaboration across business owners, business analysts, data scientists, data engineers. You've covered a ton. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise in working with these organizations, with such data-rich environments. We really appreciate your time today, Vincent. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. So we'll now take a short break of about 10 minutes, and we'll plan to be back here at 12:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time to welcome Jordan Sweetnam from eBay. Thank you very much.
In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organisations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organisations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts, along with early access to analytics talent who speak the language of business, technology, and mathematics to drive value and navigate change. Through the power of analytics, we are empowering organisations to put their future into their hands.
At SAS, we love bold questions, outrageous and impossible questions. The answers are waiting to be discovered because space isn't the new frontier. Data is. And with the right questions and the right analytics, we make data do amazing things. Like make the world safer, faster, healthier, and kinder. All we have to do is ask the data, analyze it, shape it, and make it work smarter for everyone, everywhere. With SAS, you can turn data into answers and ask the questions that move the world forward. SAS, curiosity forever.
AI in the enterprise is all the rage. But put the hype aside. How are today's organizations actually executing and seeing value from enterprise AI? Dataiku is the platform, democratizing access to data and enabling companies to build their own path to enterprise AI. To make enterprise AI a reality, Dataiku provides one simple user interface for data preparation, data exploration, automated machine learning, model deployment, AI monitoring, and management. Dataiku is built for everyone with robust features for both the code-free and the code-first. From business users and analysts to data scientists and engineers, Dataiku makes working with data faster and smarter. Each company's path to enterprise AI looks different, so Dataiku supports the creation of a spectrum of applications. Whether that means building out a self-serve analytics platform or fully operationalized AI integrated with business processes. No matter what the underlying changes in architecture or advancements in technology, Dataiku remains at the center, the cornerstone of data governance and responsible AI. Dataiku's centralized, controlled, and elastic environment fuels exponential growth in the amount of data, the number of AI projects, and the number of people contributing to such projects. Dataiku, for every industry, every use case, and also for everyone. Discover your path to enterprise AI at dataiku.com.
People have got a unique thing about them, which is not only are they awesome technically, but they feel a sense of belonging. We genuinely call ourselves a family. Genic was started out of a desire to start something from scratch that tried to tackle the data market with a new and fresh approach.
Our vision is to never settle on the technology, to be constantly chasing the unicorn.
The space is moving really quickly, and we see it as our job to be aware of new things coming, and when they are good things, be able to introduce them to our clients.
Databricks is the data and AI company. We help data teams solve the world's toughest problems. They can't be solved in silos. They can't be solved by one person. We need all the data, all the science, all the brain power in one place on the only open, unified platform for data management, business analytics, and machine learning.
In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organisations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organisations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts, along with early access to analytics talent who speak the language of business, technology, and mathematics to drive value and navigate change. Through the power of analytics, we are empowering organisations to put their future into their hands.
At SAS, we love bold questions, outrageous and impossible questions. The answers are waiting to be discovered because space isn't the new frontier. Data is. And with the right questions and the right analytics, we make data do amazing things. Like make the world safer, faster, healthier, and kinder. All we have to do is ask the data, analyze it, shape it, and make it work smarter for everyone, everywhere. With SAS, you can turn data into answers and ask the questions that move the world forward. SAS, curiosity forever.
AI in the enterprise is all the rage. But put the hype aside. How are today's organizations actually executing and seeing value from enterprise AI? Dataiku is the platform, democratizing access to data and enabling companies to build their own path to enterprise AI. To make enterprise AI a reality, Dataiku provides one simple user interface for data preparation, data exploration, automated machine learning, model deployment, AI monitoring, and management. Dataiku is built for everyone with robust features for both the code-free and the code-first. From business users and analysts to data scientists and engineers, Dataiku makes working with data faster and smarter. Each company's path to enterprise AI looks different, so Dataiku supports the creation of a spectrum of applications. Whether that means building out a self-serve analytics platform or fully operationalized AI integrated with business processes. No matter what the underlying changes in architecture or advancements in technology, Dataiku remains at the center, the cornerstone of data governance and responsible AI. Dataiku's centralized, controlled, and elastic environment fuels exponential growth in the amount of data, the number of AI projects, and the number of people contributing to such projects. Dataiku, for every industry, every use case, and also for everyone. Discover your path to enterprise AI at dataiku.com.
People have got a unique thing about them, which is not only are they awesome technically, but they feel a sense of belonging. We genuinely call ourselves a family. Genic was started out of a desire to start something from scratch that tried to tackle the data market with a new and fresh approach.
Our vision is to never settle on a technology, to be constantly chasing the unicorn.
The space is moving really quickly, and we see it as our job to be aware of new things coming, and when they are good things, be able to introduce them to our clients.
Databricks is the data and AI company. We help data teams solve the world's toughest problems. They can't be solved in silos. They can't be solved by one person. We need all the data, all the science, all the brain power in one place on the only open, unified platform for data management, business analytics, and machine learning.
In an uncertain world, understanding data is more important than ever. It can help organisations make informed decisions, face ongoing challenges with confidence, and prepare for an uncertain future. The Centre for Business Analytics works with organisations to unlock the power of data so they can make factual, proactive decisions that deliver competitive advantage. Our educational programs provide powerful learning opportunities for executives looking to transform decision-making through business analytics. We provide access to a premium analytics ecosystem, which includes world-class academics and research experts.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here for the third time today, but I am actually here to introduce a very dear friend, Professor Hugh Williams, who will be leading this session with Jordan Sweetnam at eBay. Now, many of you, I'm sure, already know Hugh Williams. He's very well known around the world, but for those who don't know him, let me just give you a very brief introduction to Hugh Williams. Hugh is an enterprise professor at the University of Melbourne. He's a distinguished fellow at the Centre for Business Analytics and has had an incredibly interesting career that spans across academia and practice, one of those unique academics that we try to bring in front of you. So Hugh is a former professor of computer science who then went on to work for companies such as Microsoft, actually reporting into Satya Nadella, and eBay, and Tinder, and also Google, which was his last corporate job. But since then, he's come back to Melbourne, which is terrific for us in Melbourne, but has also served as an advisor to companies such as DoorDash and Moonpig. DoorDash and Moonpig just had their IPOs, and of course, Hugh has helped them in their journeys towards the IPO. So we're very fortunate to have Hugh here with us. And with that introduction, I'm going to hand it over to Hugh. Welcome, Hugh.
Thank you, Ujwal. Very kind introduction indeed. It's my very great pleasure today to introduce you all to my very good friend, Jordan Sweetnam, who I'm looking forward to having a fireside chat with this afternoon. I'm sure most of you can read his bio, but just to give you a quick overview, Jordan is a Senior Vice President at eBay, based in San Jose in California, and he's also the General Manager of eBay's North America business. He has been at eBay a long time, I think around 12 years, if I'm not wrong, Jordan, before you spent some time over at Walmart for about 3.5 years, and then rejoined eBay almost 2 years ago. Jordan originally joined eBay Canada way back in 2004 as a marketing analyst and worked his way up through various roles to the most senior role in North America. Incredibly good friend of mine. And the thing you won't see in the bio is that, back in the day, Jordan and I used to sort of go head to head in an office about data all day long. And so he's one of the most data-driven leaders that I've ever worked with, and certainly bleeds eBay, deeply passionate about the sellers and the buyers and building, a fantastic marketplace where everybody wins. So very much looking forward to having a conversation with Jordan today, and I'd like you to welcome Jordan Sweetnam to the Melbourne Business School. Welcome, Jordan.
Thanks, Hugh. It's great to see you and great to be here today.
Yeah, fantastic. So 12 years at eBay, 3.5 at Walmart, and then back to eBay almost 2 years ago. What brought you back to eBay?
I just love eBay. I love the global footprint, 180 million customers globally. But it isn't just because of the awesome relationships I get to build with people around the world. Obviously, eBay's got an awesome team there in Sydney. what I really love about eBay is actually our global community of sellers. The passion that comes from sellers being able to source inventory, find the unique things. It's just this incredible collection of everything that isn't standard retail. Like, yes, you can find new in season. Yes, you can get the hottest product, but having been at eBay for, I don't know, close to 15 years in total, I have a lot of crazy collections. There's a lot of Muppets in my office, palm trees, vintage posters, and a bunch of things my wife doesn't really know are in bins in the garage. So the fun thing about eBay is the footprint and just the sheer assortment of inventory that our sellers are able to find.
And I remember, Jordan, back in the day, I remember sitting in an office perhaps in 2012 or 2013, and you and I both lamenting eBay's lack at that time of focus on collectibles. And it's interesting you bring up that space in your introduction and why you're passionate about eBay. So is that something you're bringing back to eBay now? Is that something that we will see more investment in from the company?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's hard to talk about e-commerce without having a conversation about Amazon. They have such an impact, especially in the U.S. landscape. I just got a little bit tired of fighting Amazon all the time. So I went to Walmart, loved the time there. And what my learning was that a retailer of that size, what's on the shelf is almost second to the supply chain, and how you get everything there efficiently is really key. And for me, it really unlocked the magic of what is so special about eBay, which is it isn't just how you can find what's available now. It's the collectibles. I mean, one of our hottest categories in the U.S. are trading cards. So baseball, hockey, football, soccer, basketball. We sell a trading card every second on eBay.com. And so people are looking to sort of, find the latest new sports team rookie, relive a childhood memory. And those pre-owned, pre-loved products, they aren't just good value, they're good for the environment. So when you can give an item a second home, a third home, it just reduces the total global footprint. And while that was interestingly actually how eBay was founded 25 years ago, we see that as a very clear trend among Gen Z, which is how can they look to find more identity and reduce their consumption impact.
And what about, look, traditionally stamps, coins, baseball cards, those kinds of things have been the core of collectibles. But what about today, things like sneakers, Pokemon, those kinds of things? How do they play out on eBay's collectibles experience?
Yeah, it's amazing. We're seeing this trend of collectibles as an alternate asset class. And so people are buying Pokemon cards, Magic the Gathering, sneakers. People are there's an article I read yesterday that was basically titled, Sneakers, the Alternative Mutual Fund. And people are buying, vintage and rare sneakers and sticking them in their closet and garage. Investable Lego is a huge segment. People buying, Lego before it goes out of production and then holding on to it for years. And so it's amazing to see the motivations of everything from enthusiasts to collectors to investors come to life in a category like collectibles.
One of our good friends, Jordan, and I don't know if you know this story, one of our good friends, Dane Glasgow, actually buys 2 of everything that Lego produces. He builds one and he puts the other one into a warehouse somewhere in California, and he's done that for all time. I'm sure that's worth an enormous fortune these days. But the topic today, that I wanted to really get into is data and analytics and data science. And I was excited to have you come and speak today because I know you are one of the most data-driven leaders that I've worked with. But tell us, how did you get there? So, you are a data-driven leader today, but tell us about those formative experiences early in your career at eBay and how they made you into the data-driven leader that you are today.
Yeah, I joined eBay in 2004 at the end of the free .com boom. And so people really wanted to understand, well, if the free growth is going away, what are the drivers? What is CLV, customer lifetime value? What is the efficiency of our marketing channels? And how do we find out what creates incremental growth? And so I joined as a brand new analyst and thought I was adding a ton of value. And probably one of the most influential moments I had early in my career was we were running this test on the eBay homepage. And, 34 people in the office, everybody has an opinion, we should be simple. No, we need to have education. We need to have merchandising and sell people things. And so we actually ran a multivariate test on the homepage. So we carved the homepage up into 6 placements, 4 pieces of content per placement, so 1,096 variants. I think it was like 97 because we had one that was a bit extreme. I'll tell you about in a second. And then we actually had everybody in the office bet. And so this was like testing was still new at eBay, and we had 30 people bet. The winning person had 3 out of 6 placements correct, and it was an intern. It wasn't even anybody who was fully employed in the office. The head of marketing who ran the homepage had 0 placements correct, but at best, if the team had decided, we would have unlocked less than half of the value from the homepage. And so my learning was our job as analysts, our job as employees is how do we tease up the right ideas? How do we put ourselves in a position to learn from the data? But ultimately, customers at scale can provide so much insight and really tell you what they're looking for if you have the right instrumentation and testing in place to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does that gel though with sort of Amazon's principle that leaders are right a lot? And I think that's been influential for all of us. I didn't want to turn this into a conversation about Amazon, but they believe, and I think it's right throughout the whole Silicon Valley and the west coast of the US, that you have to have leaders who are right a lot. And that sort of implies some intuition, some magic from senior folks like you. Yet, you just give us an example where nobody was right. The intern was the closest. How do those sort of two things fit together in the world that you live in?
So, one of the dangers of a company that's been around for 25 years is we have a lot of data. And so you can sometimes, I'm not a big fan of the phrase, analysis paralysis. It somehow implies the analyst isn't doing a good enough job providing insights. But the danger is you can actually spend all day long in the data. And so I do think it's important to make sure that, as a leader, you can facilitate and drive clarity in what are we trying to answer? How can we get it to market? But I've certainly learned there's no shame in letting customers tell you your hypotheses are totally wrong. And in fact, even as an analyst, most of the hardest things I've ever had to solve haven't come from the data as the starting point. It's come from listening to the customer and letting them tell me where to go look in the data. So we were trying to launch a new checkout program with PayPal, and it was negative. It was negative about 0.5%. And at eBay scale, 0.5% is a big deal. I needed that revenue. And we were weeks going through the data, the engineers going through logs, and we couldn't find any problems. And I started going through customer verbatims. We had a little leave feedback link in the flow. And this customer said, there's no pay button. And usually, customers can be a little bit crazy at times, and everybody dismissed it. And I said, okay, but if it were true, I think we'd probably agree that's a big problem that would be contributing to the issue. And just asking the question allowed us to go and dig into the data to look for customers that would have exhibited that symptom. And sure enough, that's what we found. Actually, for a very small percentage of customers on a very specific browser, there was no pay button. And so having all the data in the world is great, but the customer intuition, the business intuition can be what I found helps you thread through and navigate where to go looking in the data.
And what about those big leaps forward though, Jordan? So, I think what the users are doing is largely when you're looking at that quantitative data is they're giving you, feedback on what it is you've built today. I think that allows you to optimize what you have today and find those little problems like the missing pay button on the obscure browser. But how do you as a leader make big leaps forward and what role, if any, does data play in that?
Yeah, that one's a struggle. I mean, you need to be able to understand your flow, optimize, take out friction, but you're not going to be able to optimize yourself to a winning value prop. And that's what requires a little more of those leaps of faith and transformative vision. And so, if all you do is looking internally at your data, you can figure out how to drive more customers through the funnel. You can look at NPS or customer satisfaction and figure out how to get the next 1 or 2 points. But you either have to have external inspiration or a little bit of bravado and conviction on how are we actually going to move the customer, not from an NPS of 50 to 55, but how are you going to move them to an NPS of 80 requires a little bit of that, what I call leaning into the void, where the data isn't going to show you how to get there, but once you've built it, the data can validate you weren't insane.
And so how do you make those leaps then in an organisation that is used to A/B testing and putting things in front of customers? How do you sort of lead an organisation to make those jumps and then check that those jumps were right?
I wish I had a really good answer because I'm a little bit stubborn, so I tend to learn most things the wrong way. What I found is goals can be your best friend, and they can also be hugely problematic. And so to unlock what you've just described, I found the best way to do it is to absorb a lot of that risk as a leader and give teams permission to fail in a truly risk-free environment where they're not worried about, not banking the next 1% uplift, and they're allowed to swing for the fences and have some fun. And 8 things they test may be completely irrelevant, 1 may be a wash, but then you're going to discover that magic, the one that really changes the customer outcome, and the confidence that can give the team when marketing and product and engineering and design are all given permission to swing big. That's exciting.
Yeah. And how do you balance that sort of, I don't know, use an analogy, that sort of, you've got some dollars in the bank, you've got some dollars in private equity, some in the equity market, and then I think what you've described is more venture capital. 1 in 10 really turns out. How do you balance that portfolio as a leader?
My CFO and I have a lot of good debates about that one, is the honest answer. But like anything, it's a portfolio. So how do we make sure that we have enough high confidence plays that we can deliver on our commitments to shareholders, deliver on the basic expectations of customers around driving improvements that we're not going to fall short. And again, it depends on the domain, but making sure we've carved off enough permission, enough flexibility where some teams can take those big swings. And honestly, in a global company, it can even be a geo portfolio theory. So which countries are going to take a more conservative approach and which ones are going to have some permission to do some crazy stuff. I mean, I look at eBay Australia and the team there is just incredible. And it's because we're able to get away and test things that might be too risky to test in a big market first, but can create learnings that we can then bring back into a major region.
Yeah, I do think there's some magic things about being in a different time zone as well. Just being able to sort of, work in a different time zone to the head office gives you that freedom, and I'm sure the Australia folks, feel that to some degree. But just taking us back to data, so I think, we sort of began this conversation about data, talking about sort of quantitative data and its role and the test that you did on the homepage. Tell us a bit more about how data plays a role in your life every day as a leader. So, maybe walk us through sort of what your day looks like and how data influences what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I look at in the morning when I wake up is my phone and what are the daily results and how much traffic came to eBay, where did it come from? Was it direct ebay.com? Did it come in through natural search or paid channels? And so really like what's driving my business from day to day? Are we on track? Is it things we control or things that are external? I love to combine the quant with the qual whenever I can. And so like at the bottom of the daily email are like the hottest items, like what was selling on eBay yesterday. And so not category, but like the specific product, like this trading card set a new price. And one of the big trends lately in collectibles is what's going on with NFT, the non-fungible tokens, and the collectible digital items. Starting to see those emerge, and so you just see, at the eBay scale, one item doesn't matter, but it gives you a pulse on the trends, which I think is so cool. And so for me, my day starts with just what happened yesterday. But like I don't know, my second meeting today was around the categories where we're building. Are we paying enough to acquire those customers, right? The average value of an eBay shopper in their first year might be $300, but if someone's buying sneakers, they're worth 8 times that, and if they're buying a Rolex, they're worth 40 times that. And so do we understand how different customers bring different values, and then do our consumer systems, the ones that at scale bid on different keyword terms, run our paid marketing, can they consume all that data? And so there's not a meeting I go into where data isn't the starting and finishing point, but what that data is, whether it's site, revenue, customer, it varies, obviously.
And how do you create that ubiquity throughout the organisation? How do you make sure that people have data at their fingertips so that they can have those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, obviously, like we use a lot of data visualization tools, things like Tableau, to make sure that, our general managers have access to, what are the category trends and all sort of like what their closed loop business might look like. But there's also a need for a lot of exploratory analytics. And so, we have analysts that are partnered with each of our business teams and our technology teams, and their job is to sort of take things that might be unexplained by a standard dashboard and go and figure out, why did this happen? Why is this unexpected? And then obviously, they'll work with data scientists if there's, something more advanced we're trying to answer or explain.
Yeah. Makes complete sense. And you also mentioned before qualitative pieces. So you said before at the bottom of the daily report are some sort of qualitative things, what were the hot items that sold. You mentioned a little bit earlier on about verbatim feedback that you get. But how else does qualitative understanding of the customer play a role in what you do every day? And how do you encourage your team to have that qualitative understanding of the customer?
Yeah. One of the first things that I encouraged when I was leading teams of analysts to do was for someone who joined eBay, like, what's your passion category? Go shop in that category, go sell items, and then go and look up your own data. Because, eBay at our scale, like, we should be like efficient market theory. And so if you see data that doesn't make sense, well, maybe the data wasn't instrumented correctly. Like, and how can you confirm that if you don't have your own data? But then the flip side is, if it's instrumented correctly and you get something that's a surprise, that's probably a really important business insight. And so, when I think about, how you set up the company, how you set up analysts, it's really important that they have that curiosity to sort of, go and explore and combine physically what they see on the site, their own experiences into the data. How do I hammer that home? It's very easy for people to get in the habit of just reading a dashboard. Well, here are yesterday's trends. And so I just encourage everybody, whether they're in product and engineering, merchants, or in marketing, to always sort of lead with, like, who are the customer personas? What is their actual mission? I don't want to understand the number of customers impacted by this change. Like, what's their actual mission? Like, if we want them to do something, why didn't they do that on their own? Even in my office, which obviously I haven't been back to in a year, I've got 6 iPads up at the end of the wall showing the customer flows for each of our key competitor sites. Like, how do you sort of just bring that mission forward into how people think and act in every meeting? Like, what is that outside in lens that doesn't just sit in the data? The outside in can give you the clues on where to go and look.
Yeah, awesome. I'd love to come in and have a look at those iPads and see what's actually on there. That'd be fun. But talk about the seller and the buyer. So the interesting thing about eBay is, being a marketplace is it's two-sided. So you've got, sellers listing items and hoping to sell them, and you've got buyers looking for things and wanting to buy them. And they're both customers, and they're both giving you data. How do you sort of balance the competing demands of those, or sort of parse out, what to do given you've got two groups with slightly different interests?
That tension, that natural tension in the marketplace, is a part of what can make a job at eBay like truly excruciating at times, because there is this incredible challenge of what is the role of a marketplace. So buyers can give you the conversion data. What are they looking for? What are they shopping for? Obviously sellers are looking for us to share that data with them so they can know what items are going sourced and how to price it. And so how do we provide as much data as we can to our sellers? But then in a marketplace, things that we might be looking at internally, some sellers might not be okay sharing with other sellers for competitive reasons. So sellers would view their ability to understand buyer trends as, a key competitive advantage. If I'm a automotive parts and accessory seller, I can use eBay's demand to know what parts I should manufacture and source. And so our sellers love us to share with them all the buyer data that we can, until they get really sophisticated, and then they don't want us to share the data with other sellers because it's part of their competitive advantage. And so at our scale and with the history of eBay, it's fascinating to sort of, not just watch emerging buyer trends, but it plays a huge role in how sellers can actually source inventory, plan for their business, and identify opportunities for growth.
Awesome. I read eBay sort of going through a tech reimagination and sort of a reinvigoration. Tell us a little bit more about that. It sounds like an interesting inflection point for the company, and you're right at the center of it, recently returned to the company. So what's going on?
Yeah, when you think of like eBay's history as a marketplace, like we are a technology company at our core, we're not a retailer, but there sure is a lot of trade that takes place. And so sometimes it can be a little bit easy to sort of, just stand back and say, hey, just a platform and people will bring their inventory. But when we think about, what a tech-led reimagination does, how can you sort of give the permission to teams, to engineers to explore like hypotheses and build things that may not always have an in-the-moment ROI to create some magic for customers? And so if you look at what, take sneakers as a category, we're authenticating sneakers, make sure there's no counterfeits. Like that's not really tech yet. Humans literally pick up a shoe and smell it. But it creates this incredible opportunity for computer vision. So if you think of what a non-counterfeit shoe looks like, if you stick enough of those in a box with enough cameras, you can actually train a model to identify, oh, hey, the stitching doesn't look right in this. And so there's an incredible opportunity for our AI and computer vision team to work on how you detect counterfeits. But then it lets us do other things. So once we've touched the shoe, we can basically stick a NFC tag on it. And so when the customer gets it, they can then, with their phone, scan the sneaker. They can see when it was authenticated, when it was sold, and then if they don't take the tag off their shoe, anytime they're in their closet, they can scan it. They can see how the price has gone up on eBay. They're 60 seconds away from having that item listed on the site. And so it's just how do you? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but how do you move out of the optimization phase into giving your most passionate, sharpest talent the permission to do some things that may be a little bit uncomfortable, but allow you to unlock some really exciting customer moments, the kind of things that they're going to share with their friends because your brand is cool, relevant, it's doing things they haven't seen.
Yeah, awesome. John, we're almost out of time, but there's one really interesting question that's come in from the audience that I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. So somebody was intrigued by your mention of NFTs in the collectibles space. Is eBay's infrastructure equipped to execute transactions that involve NFTs? And if not, what's involved? How long is it going to take? And can we expect that from eBay sometime soon?
Yeah, so it's an awesome question. So are we equipped to do it right now? Sort of. We don't have the ability to check a wallet the way other marketplaces might, like OpenSea. But at our scale, buyers and sellers are just showing up and making trade happen anyways. They're putting their listings like, hey, I'll set up a Zoom link and I'll transfer it to you in real time, or hey, we'll go to this marketplace and facilitate the transaction. So with 180 million customers, whether we want trade to happen or not, whether we're aware of it, people just show up and it takes place. And I think it's super exciting. You will definitely see more from eBay in this space because I think it is actually kind of the next major, I won't say disruptor, because I think it's an evolution of collectibles for creators. Like I love what artists have been able to do where, they create a piece and can get reach and exposure they've never had before. The ability to understand the provenance allows you to do things like, rev share, which is incredible for the creators. And so I think it's for something that, most people had never even heard of 3 months ago. The momentum is a little bit mind-boggling, but I think it's an incredible opportunity for any player in the space, including eBay, to have a lot of fun and be a part of the next era of digital collectibles, digital art, etc.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Jordan, thank you very much for your time. Busy man, we really do appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us. Very much appreciate it as well. So I look forward to seeing you again soon, and thanks for being part of the Melbourne Analytics Conference.
Awesome, Hugh. Thank you so much. It was great to chat with everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Hugh, as well as Jordan from eBay. Hugh will be coming back yet again tomorrow to moderate 2 of our discussions for us. But in the meantime, we've talked a lot today about how there were no models or historical data that could have prepared organizations for 2020. The next panel is truly focused on how analytics in this new world order can be used to address the prevalent changes that we've observed in customer behavior over the last year and change. So I would like to next introduce Bede Hackney, who is the country manager for Australia and New Zealand for Databricks.
Bede has over 25 years of experience in the IT and security industries, working with high-growth companies and large multinationals. And prior to joining Databricks, Bede's held roles as a managing director for Tenable and Nimble Storage in ANZ, and was the director of product sales at VMware. So in addition to Bede's cross-technology leadership experience, he comes from a very strong technical background, focused mainly in the networking arena, where he holds a CCIE and was awarded a US patent for management of network quality of service. In 2019, Bede joined Databricks to bring his extensive expertise to help expand the company's presence in Australia and New Zealand. And he is acutely focused on driving data innovation forward and helping the success of Australia and New Zealand customers in their digital transformation efforts with data and AI. So with that, I'm going to put you in the capable hands of Bede at Databricks. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thanks very much for that fantastic introduction, and thank you to all of the audience for sharing your time with us today. It really is my great pleasure to lead this panel with some amazing panelists. By way of housekeeping, I'm going to moderate a panel discussion for about the next 30 minutes, but we've got 10 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A, and so as we go through the conversation, I'd love to see questions coming through the Q&A function in the platform, and so please do pop those through. Before I jump into the topic, I'll quickly introduce our illustrious panel. I'll start with Leah Bolter, who's the Director for Digital and Analytics at Bunnings. Leah's responsible for the Bunnings data and analytics team, obviously, the digital teams, including the online shop and the innovation lab, excuse me. Prior to joining Bunnings, Leah held a range of executive roles at companies including McKinsey and ANZ Bank. Joining Leah, you can see on the screen, is Dr. David Black, who's the head of data and product strategy at Flybuys. David leads a team responsible for delivering cutting-edge data products that enable Flybuys to better serve its members and its partners, along with defining data strategy for Flybuys to leverage data products as a growth platform. For background, David has worked in data science, analytics, and research for almost 20 years, with the last 8 years spent building and leading data teams in large organizations. Joining Leah and David is Jenny Van Zip, who's the National Customer Analytics Manager at Stockland. Jenny's obviously responsible for the data and analytics function that underpins the customer strategy across residential, commercial property, and retirement living. A former analyst herself, Jenny has 17 years of experience in business intelligence and advanced analytics, and now leads the data team responsible for advancing and operationalizing consumer or customer analytics at Stockland. And then last but not least, Christelle Young is the Chief Strategy and Analytics Officer for L'Oreal here in Australia. Christelle is an analytics executive with extensive experience in both industry and consulting, and is in fact a former scholar of the Melbourne Business School, which makes it all the more relevant. She's more than 7 years, or had more than 7 years in industry before moving into management consulting with the data analytics team at Kearney. Post-Kearney, Christelle was the General Manager for Transformation and Analytics at Toll Group. And so without further ado, I'm going to try and launch into today's panel topic, but I think, before I do, I'll just quickly say that talking about using customer analytics to identify patterns and address the underlying changes in consumer purchasing behaviour couldn't be more relevant. I think we can all agree that we've seen some unprecedented changes in consumer behaviour over the last year, and I'm super excited to hear the opinions of the team that we've got assembled. Just to set that up, if we consider, I think we all intuitively agree that there's been some major changes and upheaval in the last year. But if I throw some data points at you, if we consider that in April last year, we saw 200,000 brand new e-commerce customers in Australia alone. And so that's 95% growth year over year versus April in 2019. And I think there's a common misconception that growth all happened from inner city customers who were experiencing lockdown perhaps for the first time. Some stats on that: we saw 72% new e-commerce growth in outer regional Australia. We saw 64% in remote Australia and 56% in very remote Australia. And so we saw, I think, growth across all the different geographies. If we turn to the verticals, we saw the strongest online growth in the vertical store, variety store format, followed by fashion and apparel, and followed there by home and garden. We haven't got the numbers published for this year yet, although I think we can probably safely agree that that groceries will dominate the sector. And so, I guess why is that important for consumer analytics? Well, we can probably all agree that we went into last year with some really strong data that, through no fault of our own, very quickly became largely unuseful. And so, as we focus on this year and continue to reopen the country, I think there's some natural questions like, where will people shop? Will they shop like they did before? Or has consumer behaviours permanently changed? And so at Databricks, we spend a lot of time and energy trying to help our customers answer those questions. And I'm going to throw to the panel now to help us talk about those topics today. And so perhaps before we jump into the detail and the actual session itself, I might ask our panel to maybe comment about the changes that each of you have seen in the last 12 months. And David, I think I'm going to throw to you, and I'm going to quote you, because as we were preparing for the session, you said that you've had the fortune or perhaps misfortune of being engaged with 4 different organisations in the last 12 months, being BetEasy, Catch.com.au, the Melbourne Storm and Flybuys. So perhaps I'll ask you to sort of draw some observations across the industry as a whole, but also those different segments.
Cool. Thank you, Bede, and thanks everyone for coming along to the session. Yeah, as you said, it was a fortune, or probably more of a misfortune, I suppose, to find myself in engaged with 4 different organisations in the last 12 months and 4 different industries as well. I guess I was going to be quite vague about it and say a betting agency, an online retailer, a sports franchise, and Australia's leading loyalty program. That last one being my current employer, so I'm obviously contractually obliged to say that. Australia's leading loyalty program. So, I guess what I saw a few different things across those different industries. I guess I saw the expected, obviously, clear evidence of a paradigm shift when it came to online spending. Significant increases in the number of orders people were making, their average order sizes, and just their total amount they were spending. Obviously as well, differential impacts across the categories within the online retail as well. We saw some categories where there were temporary impacts. So things like in the household categories where we saw those, initial shocks where people were basically just stocking up supplies where they thought things were running out. Toilet paper sales, obviously, through the roof. And then also, initial increases in liquor sales as well, just people surviving those initial months in the Australian lockdowns. But then we also did see, the longer lasting impacts and trends, which are definitely clear evidence of changes in customer behaviour and things to be mindful of in the future. So I saw the expected. I saw the counterintuitive as well in an industry, I guess, where, sort of increased consumer engagement and spending in an industry whose product was basically taken away from it. As sports events got closed down, one of the kind of organisations I work for basically had its product taken away, and yet we saw a massive increases in consumer engagement and spending. And as well, I guess I saw the heartwarming, being obviously contractually obliged again to say, that increased importance and engagement with loyalty programs, as we saw supermarket shops really become one of the highlights of our lives. And so when that became the case, and a sort of associated effect of that was, an increased importance of loyalty programs. And so that's kind of what I saw, the expected, the counterintuitive, and the heartwarming, I suppose, is my perspective.
And I wonder, David, if there was any trends, when you talk about loyalty programs, obviously the way that we spent to earn our loyalty points changed, but did you see any trends in the way that, any changes in the trends in the way that we look to leverage our loyalty points?
Not as yet. I think we've seen a lot of points being accumulated, and I think the way people are intending to use those points, has remained largely the same, but also a lot of saving behaviour as well when it came to those points. So possibly, saving it for later when things open up a bit more.
Yeah, that may well be the case. Hey, Crystal, when we spoke in preparation, you were talking about L'Oreal having to undergo a pretty drastic change in direct-to-consumer. I wonder if we could bring you in here.
Yeah, sure. So very similar to, off the back of David, what you were talking about, and Bede, what you alluded to in the beginning. There was really, with with both the bushfires at the beginning of the year and then COVID, we saw an increase in the concern for both health and economy and shopping local with everything that happened. So I guess there was 3 key behavioural shifts that really happened, was this blur lines between these blended realities, digital and online, as we saw more and more of what I allude to the second shift of this e-commerce. So more and more, as both of you had said, people were shopping online, and the fact that L'Oreal was able to pivot and build up our platforms in that respect and grow off the back of those e-commerce platforms was really key, I think, for many retailers out there to survive through it. And then the local shopping was the other big key behavioural shift that we saw too. We had, not just delays in our international supply chains across many retail sectors, but also from a social reasons, consumer wanted to shop locally too. So off the back of that, vitamins, baby formula and skincare businesses were hit hard in 2020 from the Daigou channel collapse too during COVID. So they're probably the 3 big things that we really saw.
And Crystal, did that change the way that you had to look at building your data portfolio?
Probably not necessarily change the way that you look at the data portfolio, but just build and enhance on it as such. But, when you talk about the data portfolio, I think, not talking about the e-commerce and the sales side of things, but when we think about the way that we create a target, as an example, not just at L'Oreal, but other companies that I've been at, you take last year's data, and a lot of companies would be doing this across the board, take last year's data and they predict their target or their budget for this year based off last year's data. So, if you think about a little boutique down on, say, Flinders Lane, and they use their last year's sales data to predict what tomorrow's target should be and their budget should be accordingly, that is completely changed now. And what do you do? How do you adapt, and how do you think about that data differently? So I think one of the key things at the moment is this term around finding the proxy. What is our new proxy to be able to predict off? And a good example for that little boutique in Flinders Lane is we've got Melbourne sensor data all around Melbourne, and it's free. So we can start using some of the data sources that we have out there at the moment, and to be able to use them as proxies for what we previously had in our data sets that we no longer is available to us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Since alternate data has never been more important. Jenny, perhaps I could bring you in here with your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. So, yeah, I think it's been said a lot during this conference, particularly today, that our ability to compete really in this kind of new world really depends on our ability to adapt and respond to customer needs. So to be able to do that, you need to have a deep understanding of your customers and, who are they, what do they value, how do they behave, and so that we can predict what they're going to do and respond in a meaningful and profitable way. And I think I can bring this to life with a couple of examples just to give you a sense of how customer analytics can actually inform these business responses without giving too much away. But for us at Stockland, it's really been about building out our data portfolio beyond our first-party data. And we think that's really important. So the first example is really around, the behavioral shifts that we talked about in the first topic here. We all know that COVID has created a lot of behavioral shifts due to lockdowns, people working from home, and it's created a general shift in our value systems as well. So people have changed what they buy, where they buy it, and what matters to them has also changed. So understanding these shifts is really important, but understanding which ones are sort of temporary or transient versus the ones that are structural are the key questions to base long-term business decisions on. So at Stockland, we have to, as an example, we have to regularly review our center mix. And over 2020, we had obviously higher than normal vacancy levels. And so now we're facing a lot of decisions around what retailers we should be bringing in. Optimizing center mix and store location are great business problems to solve with customer analytics. I will say that our centers, despite these unavoidable vacancies, have probably fared reasonably well during the pandemic and have proven to be resilient to their regional and sub-regional locations and their weighting and more non-discretionary spend or store mix, right? But we've identified that this is more than just good luck during an unprecedented pandemic, and that it's actually an opportunity that we need to seize by understanding how customers have changed their shopping patterns. So things that people used to do in the CBD when they went to work every day, they are now doing closer to home, like services, for example. Localization is a huge trend that we're seeing, and we're using the data to work out how we can take advantage of this trend. But if we only were working with first-party data, our view of the world would be really limited. We need to understand, who these people are, build segmentation models and predictive models on that, and use external data sets to give us the other pieces of the puzzle on what's going on in the marketplace. So I have a few other examples, but I'll probably leave it at that, and maybe if anyone has any questions, we can come back to that.
Well, and I guess I'd love to ask the panel in general to jump in on thoughts on, secondary data sources. Anyone want to jump in and share your experience there? Don't all go at once. Oh, perhaps not. That's okay. Hey, Leah, we spoke about, when we spoke yesterday, actually, we spoke about some of the changes you've seen in retail. I'd love to ask you to talk about your experiences through COVID and any observations.
Sure. We were really late to the party in digital, so we, you talk about pivoting, we just got our online shop up just in time before COVID hit, and actually in New Zealand, we got our online website up literally the night before the stores sort of opened up there post their first lockdown. So for us, it was really just in time, and we had to pivot really, really quickly because, obviously COVID forced customers to shop in very different ways. We had to design a whole new model for customers to shop in anticipation that stores might be closed. So with the drive and collect model, we designed, collaboration across, a whole bunch of the team. We designed a model in 3 days, rolled it out to 3 stores in 5 days, and then trained up 46,000 team in the model in 3 weeks to sort of get it out in time before the first lockdown. And, the drive and collect program initially, it took a few days to get an order, but through data, data really helped leverage and helped our team in store just be informed in terms of the orders as they were coming in. It helped our merchandise team get, supply and demand, what essential items were people looking for during this time, and to get, the right stock into the right location. So, we couldn't have gone through last year, without the underlying data and the ways to sort of, I guess, agile ways of working across the team to pivot and move really quickly. And really we had a goal, during this time, how can we keep our team in store safe? How can we keep our customers safe, when they shop and get what they need? And that really helped focus on, what data did we need? Basic, apps like just counting how many customers are in a store so that, we were keeping customers safe when they shopped, and launching a product finder app so that customers didn't need to walk up too close to a team member to find out what aisle it was in, but they could do it themselves. And, really sort of last year, and, being able to get out so many orders was really the power, I would say, underlying it of, data fueling what everyone needed during this time.
Now, can I say on a personal note, I didn't know that Product Finder app exists, and I'll be downloading that immediately after this. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure half the audience are thinking the same thing. I'm interested here, and I guess I'll direct this question to the whole panel, but I might start with you. Do you have a view on if these consumer pattern changes are permanent? Are you expecting the drive and collect to continue, or what's your view there?
So, we've had this debate internally, and we believe drive and collect is here to stay. There is, a new world now in terms of digital and, real retail physical interaction that customers expect. So they expect to be able to go online and search and to know which store it's in and is it in stock. To then, as you were saying with the Product Finder app, to be able to go and get it themselves. Or they expect that, if they're not comfortable or for convenience, that they want to just drive and collect to be able to do that. And I think what last year has shown us, it's a step change in, what do the customers want? How do we meet customer expectations and customers' needs, and how can we do it quickly, I guess? So to answer your question, we believe Drive and Collect is here to stay.
Yeah, fantastic. Anyone else on the panel got a view on if some of these changes are permanent or temporary?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably permanent, and they were changes that were a long time coming, and it's just been sort of accelerated and cemented during the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Crystal, I think you were clutching for the mute button there.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, even just from an, I think some of them, the in-store experience will still be important. I think some of it will go back in particular industries. If you think about beauty, you do want to also be able to touch and feel a lot of the products. But I think another thing that will stay around going into a store, even in this click and collect world, is the timeliness. So Australia does not have the density, say, of our neighbours over in Asia Pacific to really be able to solve our B2C logistics problem properly. So we can't get that same day logistics happening to what some of our neighbours can. We've got a different density here in Australia in our landscape. So I think we really are off quite a long way of solving that B2C timeliness issue that we have in an e-commerce world. And I think there will still be that desire to have things now or today, or at least in the next few hours, where I can just go to the shop and click and collect at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. David, would you add anything there?
No, I think I covered it at the start, right? I think some of them are definitely permanent changes that we're going to see. But then also some will be temporary, right? People will go back to the way they were before. People do definitely still like the in-store experience when it comes to some categories. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, great point. One of my really favourite soapbox topics, if you will, is tying business value and quantifying and measuring business value when you talk about technology use cases, in particular in the data and AI space. I wonder, and Crystal, perhaps I'll come to you first. How do you go about that at L'Oreal, and are there any tips and tricks you can share with the audience?
So anyone that's worked with me knows that I also love this topic. I think of it all the time around let's not do analytics for the sake of analytics. I mean, one thing I would absolutely love to do, we have our green beauty Garnier, and I would love to see the effect that has on social media and then action into a circular economy. I mean, that's a topic I'm particularly passionate about, and I would love to get the team to do analytics on that, but we can't do everything. We can't solve every problem, and what's the value all of these problems have to our company at the end of the day is really important. And when I talk about value too at L'Oreal, it's not just about financial value, it is about sustainability, and ethical value too is just as equally important when I think about value across all of our initiatives. And so, one thing that there's two probably key things here that we've made sure that's in place. So one is around our guiding principles. So we've got 9 guiding principles amongst all our analytical projects. Number one guiding principles is that to ensure that all analytics projects has business value at the end of it. We can't just be doing analytics for the sake of analytics in the way that we utilise our time. A way that I tend to go about it is, I say, using analytics for analytics is doing a return on invested capital tree within your P&L and understanding all the use cases that drive the levers of your return on invested capital, and then being able to then have a prioritised matrix of your work on what's the ease of implementation and what's the value across all those use cases in terms of that return on invested capital.
Yeah, it's so I passionately, we didn't get to chat about this previously, but I passionately agree. Our observation at Databricks is that the data teams that generate a scorecard, and I think you talked about it with your guiding principles, but generate a scorecard that is not just can we technically do a use case, but do we have the data to do the use case? Do we have the skills to do the use case? Does the use case have business value? And investing our super rare data team talent in the use cases that actually tick all of those boxes instead of the one that happens to be technically interesting. I'll pause, and we're going to run out of time and pivot to Q&A shortly. But I'll ask the other folks on the panel any observations you'd like to share here.
I guess I would come at it. Oh, sorry. I would come at it from the aspect of a poor data scientist who does, love to do analytics for the sake of analytics. So I guess, always interested in this topic, and I guess conscious of the difficulty sometimes of actually demonstrating the value that some of these projects deliver. Actually demonstrating what was the ROI on this particular product or this particular use case that we pursued. Very conscious that that's difficult to do. And also then that it kind of drives you down that road of, okay, kind of pushing you towards those quick wins, which are fine to kind of pursue in the short term. But as long as it's not at the expense of the long term, right? The long-term strategic vision of what you're trying to build as an organization with both your data platform and your data team and the data products you want to get out there. So I'm always kind of conscious of that tension between, demonstrating these easy, quick wins that have value versus not losing sight of the longer term as well.
Yeah, Jenny, I think it was you who had a perspective on that as well. Am I right?
Well, yeah, I think what David just said was in line with what I was about to say, which there's really two parts of this, which is the first is how do you estimate the value something's going to bring so that you can prioritize it against feasibility and all those things that we talked about. But the second part is once you do it, how do you actually measure the ongoing value of this? And that links into life cycle management of these, they're not projects, they're products, they're analytical products that we build. And I think David made a great point that this sometimes forces us to prioritize kind of the things that are more easily proven. So at Stockland, some of our biggest, highest value decisions might take 10 years to see if there was an impact, but it will be in magnitudes higher value in the long term. So, does not being able to actually prove the value stop you from investing in it? And I think those are very important considerations when you're looking at all these use cases and trying to assess which ones to go after.
Yeah, it's a really healthy tension. How do I show the quick wins and build credibility for my digital transformation agenda within the company, and at the same time invest in foundations and the bigger wins that might take a longer period of time? We could probably spend a half an hour on that alone. I will pause here and just say to the audience, so in a couple of minutes, I'm going to go around the panel and ask if there was one piece of advice that you would give to retailers on how to use data to maintain flexibility and future-proof. What would that be? But before I do, I might just ask the audience to pop their questions into the Q&A because we will have a good 5 or 10 minutes to take some questions. So Leah, I haven't picked on you for a little while. Perhaps I'll ask you to go first. If there was one piece of advice that you'd provide to the audience, what would that be?
Investing in the right talent and giving them room to shine. We, last year couldn't have done it without the amazing team that we've got in, and still looking for, a whole lot more. But I think the rest of the business got a whole newfound appreciation for the data and analytics team and what they can do, and having their direct phone numbers and then building the underlying platform as well for them to work off.
Yeah, it's super interesting that finding the right talent was one of the topics that popped up in our pre-call, and even on the vendor side of the fence, I can relate to the challenge. I think I've got about 15 open data science headcount right now, and it's very painful to find the right people. Crystal, is there a piece of advice you'd share?
I couldn't agree more with Leah about the talent side of things. But to add to that too, I think if I think about flexibility too, I think about speed and two factors here, and something that was really prevalent in the Analytics Impact Index that Melbourne Business School and A.T. Kearney did, and they're into their 4th year, I think they are, on the Analytics Impact Index, was around the difference between a leader and a laggard too, was this timeliness of their data accessibility too. So it's one thing if you want to be quick and you want to make quick decisions, you need timely data. So leaders really stood out as having real-time data, even real-time pricing models, and the access to make those decisions in real time too, I think is really key to set that up if you want that real quick decision making process. And the other part is around this clear KPI definition. So a lot of the leaders, what they saw had an understanding of their leading indicators as opposed to their lagging indicators when they report and when they analyse this data. It's not just about what the market was or what the sales was and all the lagging indicators, but what are all the leading indicators. So if you've got real-time accessibility into understanding your leading indicators and modelling that effectively, you're able to make decisions on them to to influence the output and the lagging indicators. And I thought that was a really cool insight into the Analytics Impact Index too over the last few years.
Thank you. Awesome. Super interesting. Jenny, anything from you?
Yeah, I would agree with Leah and Pascal. I think that the other thing is obviously no amount of talent or technology is going to help you if you don't have good data sets. And I think siloed data is very limited. So I would say look for ways to increase the competitive value of your data, either by using analytics to make better use of your first-party data, or enrich and layer it with other data sets, and to look for those partners or open data sets that will fill your gaps and address your blind spots, because whoever assembles that puzzle the best will be in a winning position, I think.
They will indeed, a super common theme. Hey, David, any recommendations or advice you could provide, and then we'll pivot to some of these questions that are coming through.
Yeah, so definitely agree with those already said, and I guess mine would be perhaps on the more technical side. I guess when you're thinking about particular products or particular use cases, and that would be to always be guided by a conceptual framework. What you're actually trying to do with that product and with that end goal in mind. I guess when we're talking about customer analytics, what we're always, trying to talk about is causality, right? Trying to understand human behaviour, what causes human behaviour, and then use that to respond and influence that behaviour, to satisfy customer preferences, but then also to get them to do what we want them to do essentially, and optimise their engagement with us as a product owner.
And it's probably a great segue, actually. So there's a couple of questions coming through, and to the audience, please keep those coming. But one from Philip here is, and I'm going to address it to you, David, but perhaps anyone can jump in. It's a fun topic. How do we avoid creeping out our customers by learning more about them than they know, e.g. teen pregnancy story from Target in the US?
Was it how do we not creep out our customers, I assume it was, sorry?
I'm going to assume that the intent was not to creep out our customers, yes.
It's a fine line, right? Like, we always want to know more about our customers. I guess at the end of the day, it's about demonstrating that what we're trying to do with that information is to provide a more personalised and engaging experience. It's to give them what they want, not to necessarily spy. It's to be showing them that we're providing them a service that's targeted, timely, relevant to exactly what they want and what they expect from us as a provider.
And I'll open it to the rest of the panel. Any perspectives that you can add? I think it's a great topic.
I think there's a difference between personalization and hyper-personalization, and you really should only be in the hyper-personalization space when you have data that the customer has given you or consented to you using.
Yeah, nice. And sorry, please jump in, Lee.
I was just going to say, coming from a position of having, trusted brand is something we're really, really conscious of, and, to make our privacy policy in terms of collection of data really clear on our website, what we will do and what we won't do, also putting it up physically in the stores, printing it and having it up there, so it's really, really, really clear in terms of what we will and what we won't do.
Yeah, nice. Hey, Jenny, I might come back to you because there's a question here that I think is a follow-up to your discussion about data sets. And the question is, what's the secret sauce in combining data sets with your own data, and what stops others from doing the same thing?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I don't think one that I want to respond in great detail to such a large audience. But I think, look, there's a few things to consider. You have to consider the granularity of the data and what granularity you want it at so that it's actionable enough. And whilst, respecting all privacy and governance kind of considerations. What stops others from doing the same thing, I think, is that it takes a lot of creativity to use your own data sets as well as a wide variety of other data sets. And I think many people, many companies, certainly many of our peers, look to off-the-shelf solutions, and those are precisely the expensive kind of insights that sort of everybody has access to, so nobody has a competitive advantage. So we've actually done a lot of work to get to the point where we have something that I think really differentiates our ability to understand our customers, where it's not just some demographic segmentation and some, spend numbers. It's actually a segmentation that, we build based on behavior, and that we leverage our own first-party data set to enrich and enhance because that's how you make it truly predictive, I think. So I don't know if I answered the question or if I gave away too much or too little, but I see it as a competitive advantage for Stockland, something that's not easy to copy.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. Here's another topic or sort of lens that we haven't looked at today. So I will open this up, and Crystal, maybe I'll start with you for this one. Given the disruptive impact of COVID on supply chain, does the panel have any insights into the use of data analytics on the supply side, which I think is super interesting? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I know. On mute. So yeah, okay, the use of data analytics on the supply side. I think that this opens up a really interesting topic, I think, is around data sharing too when it comes to supply chains and mitigating the bullwhip effect by sharing that data. It's not something that we do here at L'Oreal, but definitely I think something that some other companies do, and I think something that more and more companies should look into doing too. And how do we work together a little bit to solve this supply chain issue and be a little bit more lean in the way that we go about it from our whole entire supply chain end to end. So as an example, some of our customers, if we can understand their issues a little bit more intimately, then we can mitigate the effect of our supply chain issues down the other end. But I think a really big one here is around government regulations too, and just things that are out of our control. So how do we, predict that? Well, it's pretty unpredictable too around some of those government regulations. How do we mitigate against that is also, I guess, having the foresight to really understand what are some of those risks and how are we going to use data to mitigate against those risks. What is our backup plans across the board? That's really how I would say to that.
Yeah, thank you. Without giving away anything proprietary, does any of the other panel have views on leveraging data and insights on the supply side?
I'm happy to chip in here. Obviously, supply chain has been really, really important over the last year, as I said earlier, in terms of getting the right product into the stores where customers wanted them. And for us, it was about not being effectively the nerve centre for that with the data and analytics team, but actually upskilling the supply chain team and working with them in partnership so that we moved to a self-service model, which was really key, I think, for the supply chain team, over the last year in particular.
I think that's a great point. Now, I think we're about to wrap up. David or Jenny, anything that you would throw into this topic before we finish up for today?
Ooh, I'm in the dark, so no.
Really, you keeping your light on there with the
trying my best. There we go.
Excellent. Okay, well, guys, look, I think we're running up to the end of the session, and so it just remains for me to say thank you again very much for. I know the feedback coming through the comments here is really positive, and the audience have enjoyed your insights into data and analytics. Thank you very much, Crystal, Leah, Jenny, and David. Really appreciate your time today, and thanks again to the audience.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, Bede, and all of our wonderful panelists, Jenny, Christelle, Leah, and David, for joining us. We're coming close to another end of day 2 now of our Business Analytics Conference week. And some of the common themes that I saw today, especially listening to through all the sessions, first it came through in the panel that we just heard as well, finding creative ways to create new models that you may not have thought of before within that customer analytics space, given that past models and past data were no longer relevant really in 2020 to us. So we heard Christelle mention using pedometer data. We heard Jenny speak about using open source or other third-party data sets to supplement existing data sets within the organization. So that really struck a chord with me, where you don't know the answer and you need to form a new crystal ball. The potential for looking for creative data sources that you may not have considered before. The second part that came through to me today as a common theme between some of the different sessions is Vicent at Data IQ mentioned specifically self-service and being able to scale AI. So here in the panel that just finished up right there, Leah was talking obviously about scaling up models very, very quickly, 3 days model, 3 stores in 5 days. And then also, of course, the app, the product finder app, the self-service of pushing customers ultimately to be able to find what they need when they want it on their schedule. And so that self-service, along with Vicent's presentation around AI and being able to produce something that customers can do to self-service to improve their customer journey, especially during 2020, was another theme that came out to me. And of course, Lisa Ronson also mentioned using third-party data sources. So she herself said this morning, looking forward at the crystal ball that Coles was going to create when all of this happened, they consulted various international sources where they perhaps were a step or two ahead in the pandemic as to what to expect, whether it's the toilet paper becoming the price of gold or otherwise. And then, of course, we had 2 of our professors joining us. We had Raghu earlier today from Wharton talking about the impact of subscription programs. So if you're an organisation that does offer subscription programs, he had some sound advice around, first of all, that subscription cost being very much a sort of a sunk cost in a consumer's mind. But as you can understand, it certainly drives increased frequency of which they make purchases, whilst the individual items in those baskets that they are purchased, they do go down. So it's some food for thought as you start to think about subscription models, should your organisation be interested in offering those. And then, of course, Professor Ujwal Kayende, who talked about TripAdvisor and online word of mouth, a very nice follow-on to Sanan's talk from yesterday. But in terms of the reviews that are most helpful, really ultimately are the things that are non-observable immediately, and then the types of things and content that people find helpful within these reviews after doing such a thorough analysis. So we're grateful that he was able to share that with us as an early sneak preview to the work that he's done in that space with his collaborators in the US. So in preparation for tomorrow, day 3 of our Business Analytics Conference, we actually are going to welcome Steve Tedelis, Professor Steve Tedelis from UC Berkeley, from the US again tomorrow morning, along with Glenda Crisp from the NAB and Enterprise Professor Hugh Williams, who spoke with Jordan Sweetnam today, will be back once again to moderate 2 of his good colleagues and friends, Julie Farago from Verily Life Sciences, as well as James Cameron, who is a partner of Airtree Ventures. Tomorrow's focus will be on technology, machine learning, and AI. So we look forward to having you join us again tomorrow, which will be again 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And you will have received a new link for day 3 for you to use tomorrow. All of our sessions again today will be switched into on demand, so you will be receiving an email about that shortly. So should you have missed any of the sessions today around customer analytics, you're welcome to log back on and check them out at your leisure. So on behalf of Melbourne Business School and the entire Centre for Business Analytics team, thank you so much for joining us on day 2 around customer analytics, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Thank you very much for joining us.